Hey guys! Tonight we're trying something a bit unusual. You're not heading off to battle, you're not facing execution, and you're not exploring uncharted lands. No, tonight you're simply heading out for a beverage. More precisely, to a tavern from the Middle Ages. Chances are you might not make it through unscathed. Truthfully, with dubious cleanliness, drinks stronger than anticipated, and an environment that feels oddly prone to violence, your odds are about as good as a hen strolling into a gathering of foxes. Before you settle in, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up if you truly appreciate what I'm sharing here, and hit subscribe. Also, drop a comment about which city you're tuning in from and what the current time is there. Now, lower the lights, perhaps switch on a fan for that gentle ambient noise. And let's gently drift into this evening's adventure. You near the tavern right as twilight fades. The roads are slippery with uncertain substances, rain, waste, or equine droppings. The odor strikes first, damp straw, decaying produce, and a faint sharpness from human exertion. Next comes the noise, a subdued din of voices competing to be heard, bursts of chuckles, the thud of an object or individual toppling over. A violin scratches faintly above the rest, struggling to hold its pitch. You pause briefly, then shove the sturdy oak door inward. It creaks as if it hasn't seen oil since the previous epidemic. Within, the lighting is faint, not the soft glow of romantic candles, but more like a dimness that forces your vision to adapt swiftly. Straw scatters the ground, intended to absorb the filth, yet it mostly churns it into a mess. Haze lingers from the main fireplace, where an item resembling food rotates on a skewer. All surfaces, walls, tables, seats, are coated in layers of leaked beverages, fat, and an adhesive substance you'd prefer not to examine closely. You tread cautiously. The innkeeper, or rather the alewife, spots you. She offers no grin. Warmth isn't the focus in this spot, but she motions to an available seat. You squeeze in between a fellow in a coarse wool garment who's already unsteady, and another who reeks as though he battled a fish to its end en route. You stifle a retch. No menu exists for selecting drinks, since there's none available. You receive whatever they've prepared that day. If fortune favors you, it's mostly ale rather than remnants. The crowd is boisterous. Sobriety is absent. This isn't a venue for refined discussions paired with gourmet platters. It's a spot for hollering, pounding surfaces, and sporadically retching in a shadowed nook when unobserved, which occurs more frequently than expected. Your beverage arrives in a hefty earthenware cup, placed firmly before you. It's tepid, not steaming, merely at room temperature. You taste it warily. It's tart, lacking fizz, and carries a faint grassy note, but it serves its purpose. Your lips prickle, your throat scratches. This isn't a craft brew. To your side, a person launches into a melody or perhaps a chant. It's a mix of archaic English and sheer intoxication. Others chime in, off-pitch yet eager. The tune appears to revolve around a swine that absconded with a man's spouse. The climax arrives, and half the establishment bursts into mirth. The remainder misses it and hurls fragments of hardened bread. You dodge reflexively. A boy, perhaps no more than 10, dashes by with a platter of additional cups, likely the alewife's offspring. His garment hangs loosely, and he's shoeless. He halts to retrieve a bronze coin from the straw, inspects it with a sniff, and tucks it away. Ambition begins young in this setting. The local trade thrives on liquor and determination. On the topic of liquor, your cup is refilled without request. You swallow more boldly this time. It slides down smoother, or perhaps your palate has conceded. In a shadowed area, several men engage in a game of bones, slamming their hands onto the surface and bellowing figures as if invoking enchantments. One rises and roars. Anyone wagering their footwear? He's serious. Another accepts. The shoes are removed. The bones tumble once more. You ponder how many depart this venue without shoes. Likely quite a few. A figure collides into you from the rear, forcefully. You pivot to see a flushed woman beaming, teetering with a tray bearing solely empty vessels. She gazes at you, hiccups, then wanders away, giggling like a sorceress. You're uncertain if she's employed here or merely grasped the tray for stability. Regardless, the vibe in this space is unpredictably neutral. Now the aroma of cooked flesh vies with the scent of humanity. It's not unpleasant, merely intense, akin to being submerged in unrefrigerated broth. Your belly rumbles despite it. You haven't consumed anything since midday, and imbibing on an empty stomach is a poor choice in this era. You signal the alewife. She acknowledges without glancing and vanishes. 10 minutes pass, then she deposits a timber platter, a portion of meat, ideally swine, a chunk of dark loaf, and a dab of what you hope is condiment. You consume with your hands, as others do. Utensils like forks are non-existent. Ladles are extravagant. Blades are personal items, and cloths for wiping are conceptual. A canine brushes your limb and seizes the remnant of your bread. You release it. You're not inclined to clash with a stray hound that likely bears more wounds than a veteran warrior. At the adjacent table, a discussion intensifies. It concerns whether the monarch is ordained by heaven or merely fortunate. Tones escalate. One cites a religious discourse. Another references a jest from the tavern. A third strikes the surface, overturning half his vessel. You observe fingers hovering near daggers. But then a loud expulsion of gas occurs, and the group dissolves into amusement. Tension diffused. Across the chamber, a figure in a hooded garment hunches, sipping deliberately while observing all. Every establishment has such a person. Nobody engages him. You refrain as well. He could be an informant, a revenue agent, or simply profoundly reclusive. Better to remain ignorant. The evening advances outside. Inside, moments stretch. You've lost count of your intake. It's sufficient. You sense warmth, excessively so. Your ears hum. You recline against the coarse wooden wall and allow the tavern's murmur to envelop you. Chuckles, clatters, hacks, whispered invocations, tunes. A call for an additional serving rings out. The alewife exhales noticeably, and just as you begin to consider, perhaps this isn't terrible, a scuffle erupts by the fireplace. You don't know the trigger. Nobody does, but it's underway. A seat is hurled, a body drops, a cup breaks, the hound yelps. Greetings from the medieval tavern. You've endured the initial hour. Now, can you last the evening? Something catches your attention as the altercation persists. It's not merely that one combatant lacks a shoe and perhaps several teeth. No, it's the lack of astonishment among the patrons. The skirmish isn't halted by authorities or the proprietor. The alewife doesn't interrupt her tasks. She merely sighs, seizes a broom, and begins prodding spectators aside to prevent further spills. The hound, encouraged by the disorder, rushes in to lap at dripped sauce from a boot. You retreat into the dimness, observing. Punches land, slurs follow, and soon both fighters collapse in a gasping heap of limbs and ego. One weeps, the other chortles. The conflict concludes. The assembly applauds. This is merely routine for the night. You consume more. By your third cup, reality blurs softly. Noises merge. The stomp of footwear on timber, the buzz of rumors, the drag of seats, the dull clank of a tankard on the surface. You ponder the oddity that imbibing here isn't treated as an event. There's no culture of weekend outings. It's simply existence. Rise, labor, drink, rest, repeat. This stems from the fact that in this era, intoxication is less about relaxation and more about survival. Literally, water is unreliable, even hazardous. The brooks beyond the settlement serve multiple purposes: laundering, disposal, occasionally hosting deceased vermin. Heating water is laborious. Unless you're a cleric or exceptionally vigilant, you're likely skipping it. Thus, ale. Ale is the secure option. The preparation eliminates most contaminants. Even youths consume it, though diluted forms known as small beer. So, when a person mentions drinking throughout the day, it could signify mere hydration. In a manner. You recall an earlier mention during a round of knucklebones. A lean man with a bent nose leaned close and remarked, "It's not indulgence if it's breakfast." Then he belched toward your arm and forfeited the following turn to a barefoot cleric. It's then you observe the nuanced levels of inebriation in the space. There's no stark divide from clear-headed to obliterated. It's akin to a gradual wave. One individual slumps in his seat, gaze vacant, rocking subtly like grain in a breeze. Elsewhere, a woman twirls her cup leisurely, peering into it as if seeking wisdom. Two youths by the fire debate imbibing ale inverted. One attempts it and sputters into the embers. Yet there's a distinction between merry and ruined, and the locals recognize it. The fellow who stumbles and empties his drink earns mockery, certainly, but also a cautionary look from the alewife. Messy intoxication harms trade. You desire an atmosphere lively with joy, not reeling with turmoil. It's a delicate equilibrium, one the frequent visitors have largely perfected. That's when a neighbor leans close and inquires if you'd like the potent variety. You're unclear on the implication, but you assent, as you've already chosen poorly, so why halt? He retrieves a modest flask from beneath his garment. Honey wine, he states, though it scents more of remorse and remote hives. It sears on the way down, but pleasantly. Somewhat. You cough. He pats your back vigorously enough to jar your hearing. It's peculiar to view drunkenness as routine, but in medieval times, it essentially is. The boundary between capable and incapacitated is slim, and many traverse it daily. Workers imbibe to dull, aching limbs. Fighters drink to slumber. Females consume to soften a society that demands labor, service, and childbearing without grievance. And you're partaking because you're in an unfamiliar era in an odder locale. The gentle haze wards off the strangeness. But there's an undercurrent to this. Not all view this habitual sipping favorably. Religious advocates are beginning to murmur in addresses. The tavern is the adversary's sanctuary, they declare, and ale the doctrine. You chuckle, then recognize it's not wholly inaccurate. There's ceremony here, fellowship, a cadence, individuals uniting to submerge the day's woes in froth and overlook the fissures in the barriers. Nonetheless, definitions of inebriation vary. One person you converse with claims 3 measures suffice. Another boasts of handling 7 without effect, which, judging by his demeanor, is false. Then a cleric, perhaps the earlier one or not, they merge asserts he's never intoxicated, merely contemplatively elevated. He sanctifies his cup prior to each taste, for caution. Contemporary scholars debate the extent of daily medieval intoxication. Were individuals perpetually mildly affected, or merely sipping low-strength concoctions throughout the hours? Some experts suggest remarkable endurance. Others contend they were as impaired as contemporary revelers, but less inclined to document it later. You attempt to envision a rustic social media post and promptly regret it. Another cup. You believe it's your 4th or 5th. A buoyancy fills your torso. Your arms seem remote yet agreeable. You chuckle at an unheard jest. And now you're integrated into the haze, the tavern's collective entity. You flow with it, imbibe amid it, become inseparable from it, and then, inevitably, dancing commences. It's not graceful, it's not synchronized. It's more akin to trampling with sporadic spins, but it's contagious. You're hauled up before objection. A person claps. Another starts drumming the table in sync. You shuffle. You rock. You don't falter excessively. Your mind whirls, but you're smiling. There's liberation here, even if untidy and reeking of perspiration. You're amid unknowns, yet you don't sense peril, for the moment. It's only upon reseating, heated and panting, that you sense it. The subtle recognition that the pleasant intoxication might soon veer into the type you can't dismiss easily. But not yet. Presently, you're merely a touch indistinct at the margins, a bit relaxed in the joints. You sip once more. It's warm, known, and mildly awful, but effective. You've advanced from inquisitive wanderer to honorary patron. Well done. Your prize? A throbbing skull come morning, and perhaps an unplanned marking, if the evening proceeds as foreseen. Around your 6th or 8th cup, you notice the woman at the counter observing you, not distrustfully, just astutely, as if she's witnessed countless naive visitors stumble into the tavern, get swept into the vortex of ale, sweat, and melody, and gradually slump into the straw. She's not merely dispensing drinks, she embodies the tavern, and her name, as a nearby patron slurs while shoving a cooked onion into his mouth, is Maud, or perhaps Matt. Opinions differ. She's no serving girl. She's an alewife, and this is her realm. You approach, teetering only mildly, and balance on a barrel serving as a seat. Up close, Maud or Matt possesses the demeanor of one intolerant of folly. Her cuffs are folded back, her palms ruddy and roughened from dough preparation, and hauling inebriates by their garments. She fetches a new container from behind the counter, inhales its aroma, and grumbles about it being immature. Then, unprompted, she fills you a partial cup. She crafted this personally. That's the system here. Brewing isn't a trendy pursuit or leisure activity. It's earnest, grimy, vital commerce. And for ages, particularly in medieval settlements and hamlets, it's predominantly managed by women. These alewives form the core of the regional economy. Part alchemist, part host, part communal anchor. In certain areas, over half the ale vended is produced by women, frequently from their residences or linked taverns like this. You observe as she navigates behind the counter, repositioning vessels and inspecting a simmering pot that appears somewhat unruly. Brewing occurs in modest quantities, often sufficient for the week or less. It's not precise yet, but these women rely on flavor, scent, and honed intuition from years of simmering, filtering, and hoping the fermentation succeeds. You inquire about the components. She eyes you as if you've questioned the essence of flame. Grains, she responds. Water, herbs. Then reluctantly adds, a touch of mugwort, yarrow, perhaps bog myrtle. You nod as if comprehending. What you're consuming likely lacks hops. Hops aren't standard in brewing until later medieval periods. Instead, alewives employ a blend of plants and herbs termed gruit, which imparts taste, sharpness, and potentially subtle visions if overconsumed, which frankly you're nearing. But the beverage is merely the spectacle. These women oversee complete enterprises, procuring grains, tending flames, tracking accounts, sometimes mentally, and safeguarding their domain from rivals. And rivals exist. If Maud spots a competing tavern nearby, underpricing or diluting their ale, rest assured she'll confront them, sleeves up and ladle ready. This is commerce, and it's intimate. Not without challenges, though. Many towns mandate brewing permits, and unannounced checks by ale conners or evaluators can define or destroy repute. One flawed lot, one patron succumbing to oddly frothy ale, and your trade could evaporate. There's even a regional association, a brotherhood of brewers and alewives, that establishes norms and resolves conflicts, often via sampling competing brews in solemn, highly intoxicated assemblies. Some claim the church disapproves of female brewers and vendors. Others suggest abbeys are covertly encroaching on the trade with their potent varieties, branding them medicinal. There's even a marginal notion circulating that the archetypal witch imagery, the conical hat, the seething pot, the broom stems from brewers' appearances and methods. They donned tall hats for market visibility, agitated boiling mixtures in large cauldrons, and hung brooms outdoors to indicate fresh ale. Essentially, your server this evening is a cultural archetype. You're about to note this when Maud is diverted by an arrival. 2 bags of barley deposited at the entrance by a flushed adolescent with limbs like posts. She assesses the grains swiftly, flips him a coin and a bread portion. Transaction complete. She's back at the fireplace, agitating the mixture and murmuring about heat and consistency. You ask about yeast. She smirks. Naturally, it arrives independently. It's embedded in the structure by now. That's no mere flourish. The yeasts in these medieval concoctions are untamed literally drifting in the atmosphere. adhering to wooden implements, persisting in containers. Thus, each batch varies subtly, even from identical ingredients in liquid. Some are zesty, some acidic, some sharp. One might induce coziness, while another prompts reevaluation of choices and renders your digits gelatinous, and no assurance it won't prove fatal, which leads to a genuine peril. Medieval ale lacks pasteurization, oversight, or sanitary oversight. A poor brew could sour, harbor harmful fungi, or develop unexpectedly. Individuals do perish from tainted drinks, yet most accept it as inherent risk. Lifespans are brief already, best to savor while possible. You express gratitude to Maud, uncertain if she registers, and return to your position at the table, cup in grasp. Your legs resemble soft dough. All glows faintly. The hearth flames snap like a known melody. You survey and recognize how many women navigate the dimness here, not solely dispensing drinks, but negotiating, wagering, inspecting casks. This realm belongs to them as much as any noble's fortress or warrior's field. One woman calls from the rear, and Maud retorts with a quip. The space chuckles. You're still unclear on the exchange, but the sentiment spreads. By now, the ale has thoroughly infused your veins. Your ideas drift like flotsam. You feel wonderful, truly wonderful, as if you could twirl or weep or embrace the hound, now dozing beneath your seat with a sock in its jaws. So, here you stand, merry, warmed, encircled by Brewsters, and still fundamentally intact. You may not identify your drink's contents, but you know its creator, and that signifies something. You stir briefly, or perhaps you never fully dozed. The ground under your seat is firm, uneven, and scents vaguely of ruined onions and aged hide. A foot encroaches your area, or maybe yours does theirs. It's hard to discern. What is evident is the tavern persists vibrantly. You blink leisurely and rise, attempting nonchalance, as if you intended to recline in a pool of tepid ale beside a partially gnawed poultry bone. The atmosphere is denser now, more potent. As the evening deepens, so does the tavern's ambiance. It's no longer crowded with midday traders and workers seeking respite and a swift sip. Now it's the steadfast, the dedicated, those without morning obligations or who've ceased caring. These individuals have claimed their preferred spots, vessels, and conversational niches. A call for a round echoes, and the alewife Maud, Matt, or perhaps either, based on her disposition, emits a sound indicating she's performed this countless times. She tilts her head toward a row of casks along the wall. Nobody approaches a counter to request, not truly. No slate lists costs, no ale selection. You merely indicate, grunt, or arch brows and hope favorably. Payment here is partly currency, partly rapport. If Maud favors you, you receive the superior brew. If not, well, you're sipping something oddly heated and acrid, potentially from the prior week. You ponder how individuals even selected drinks then. In an era predating uniform brewing or labels, ale wasn't uniform. It was an experiment in a vessel. Each lot varied drastically in potency, flavor, or impact. Some were mild and feeble, scarcely matured, suited for youths and laborers needing moisture over impairment. Others robust enough to unsteady a beast. The issue: no visual cue, no shade guide, no convenient strength indicator. You sample, pause 5 minutes, and pray your tongue doesn't numb. Tonight, Maud provides you a cup with a rich amber hue and frothy crown. Appears promising. You sample cautiously. It's tart, not disagreeably, more like crisp cider with a rustic edge. Your mouth contracts, then relaxes. Flavors of smoke and fruit, perhaps a trace of remorse, but consumable. Certainly consumable. Around you, patrons imbibe purposefully. One clutches his cup as if it anchors him to existence. Another sips deliberately, surveying the space as if composing verse or scheming vengeance. A nearby woman elevates her cup and salutes. No one specific, merely the atmosphere. You return the gesture. It seems courteous. But there's no actual beverage list in a medieval tavern. You're generally receiving whatever's ready. Whatever's completed fermenting remains potable and lacks mold. Ale predominates, but cider might appear if apples abound, or perry from pears, or mead from a fruitful bee season. Wine is scarcer, costly, reserved for aristocracy, ecclesiastics, or those with strong ties. Even then, it could be thinned, flavored, or sweetened to mask its deficiencies. You overhear a patron grumbling about receiving sanctified ale unintentionally last week. Evidently, it was hallowed during a festival and stored incorrectly. He vows he became merry and glimpsed St. Catherine in the flames. Nobody credits him, naturally, but all are entertained sufficiently to heed. He retells it to the neighboring group, embellishing. St. Catherine grinned, clutched a cup, and possibly winked. There's a subtle boundary between beverage and remedy in this era. Some ales incorporate woodruff, sage, or fennel, not solely for taste, but wellness, or what qualifies as such. You might consume something to alleviate a headache, suppress a cough, or repel malevolent forces. An elderly man asserts his evening cup of beet-laced ale maintains his hair dense and his digestion regular. You acknowledge politely and take a larger swallow to evade reply. Another quirk. Ale's strength fluctuates wildly, not just by formula, but locale, season, and brewer's attentiveness. In some settlements, it's scarcely stronger than water. In others, potent enough to reduce an adult to tears in archaic tongue. And since unlabeled, most discern via tradition, experimentation, and mishaps. Abundant mishaps. You glance at a trio of youths, evidently in the mishap phase. One attempts to rise, forgets his limbs, and reseats with a startled sound. His companion endeavors a grave dialogue with a candle holder. The third merely chuckles, without cause, just chuckles. Amid this, the ale evaluator arrives. He's not proclaimed, but a plump, rosy-cheeked man with a timber spoon navigates the space adeptly. He immerses the spoon in assorted cups and casks, samples, smacks his lips, and grunts. His role: ensure the ale sold isn't toxic, overly acidic, or unlawfully dilute. You observe him appraise Maud's prime cask. He nods affirmatively. She feigns indifference, but her grin flickers. It's a minor triumph. There's an odd trust in this realm of unmarked brews. You depend on the tavern keeper's integrity, the brewer's expertise, and perhaps a dash of folklore. Folks claim they can detect cursed ale, or if ill fortune taints a batch. Some bear minor talismans, tiny bones, holy tokens, loops of dried herbs, concealed in belts or affixed to cups. Not from belief in sorcery precisely, but precaution never harms, particularly when consuming something potentially containing fungi, thistles, or that peculiar root the herbalist vows is harmless. You gaze at your drink. It's nearly depleted. You're uncertain if intoxicated or merely steeped. The space sways as you rise. You grip the table's edge and smile. You're upright. That's victory. Across the chamber, the dice activity resumes, louder now. Near the flames, a man croons a romantic ode to what seems a poultry limb. You salute him. He nods gravely. You're now formally integrated into the tavern. The beverages may vary. The titles might alter. But this cadence, this odd, warm, turbulent pulse, you've discovered it. And it'll propel you to the subsequent round, regardless of your liver's opinion. A sudden hush descends, and briefly you wonder if the ale has overtaken your mind and muted everything. But no, it's genuine. The yells subside, the melodies fade, and all attention turns to the rear corner, where a makeshift surface has been prepared. A few seats are drawn together. Someone casts down carved ivory dice, and abruptly the amusements commence. You're beckoned over, not inquired, with a head jerk and nod implying, "You seem foolish enough to bet while impaired. Join us." And you do, as your veins are heated, your judgment clouded, and well, what alternative exists? Knit? The pastime is straightforward conceptually. Cast the dice. Highest sum triumphs. But it swiftly degenerates into shouts, boasts, and sporadic claims of deceit. Your initial throw rattles across the surface and lands in a minor ale pool. All await. One die shows 6. The other spins leisurely, settling on 1. "Misfortune," declares a man with singed brows. He thumps your back hard enough to shake your frame. Next, a smith whose palms resemble hams. He chuckles like a beast, hurls like one too. The dice leap high and roll distant, one nearly into a soup. 8, he thunders as if claiming conquest in combat. The group whoops. Coins exchange. You reach for your sack and realize you're unclear on your stake. Or what? Someone gains socks. Another barters a cheese wheel. One man offers what he deems a affection token from a server, though she denies it vocally and lobs a vegetable at him. The amusements aren't solely dice, though. There are imbibing challenges, too. A man dares another to drain a full earthen cup non-stop. The defeated must kiss the alewife's goat. The goat, evidently, resides behind the tavern and isn't amicable. The assembly adores it. You learn swiftly that defeat here is seldom the gravest. Declining participation is. A sturdy man with flushed cheeks and a beard, one could vanish and slams a cup down and yells, "3-man drink!" You don't comprehend, and before inquiry, someone's passing you a container. It tastes of matured apples and treachery. You consume as committed and instantly rue every choice leading here. Your belly hiccups. Your throat rebels. You maintain composure barely. Then arrives the eel. It's deposited on the surface on a splintered plank, coiled like a fleshy cord, cooked to an indefinable gray. It gleams, suggesting recent vitality and probable resentment. The dare is basic. Devour the eel entirely. No utensils, no flavorings, no inquiries. You've consumed worse, perhaps. You grasp the eel. Its flaccid, elastic, and sense of aged footwear and stream muck. You bite. The consistency is midway between chewy candy and remorse. The group howls. You masticate. You ingest. You wish otherwise, but you prevail, and someone slides a silver piece your way as if you've vanquished a beast. Games in the tavern aren't truly about funds. They're about prestige, flair, and narratives. Everyone desires to depart tomorrow recounting, "Recall when I compelled the evening visitor to consume 3 onions and honk like a fowl?" That's the genuine tender here. Accounts worth repeating. And if fortunate, you'll be recalled positively. If not, you'll be recalled regardless. A lad with uneven teeth and excessive vigor for this hour spins a top on the surface. It's crafted by hand, shaped from bone, and he challenges anyone to surpass his duration. He's remarkably skilled. You attempt. Yours teeters instantly and topples into a cup. The assembly groans theatrically. You bow dramatically. The boy labels you a vegetable. You're not even offended. Nearby, a woman with a raspy voice and a belt of vacant flasks accepts arm-wrestling dares. She defeats 3 cultivators consecutively before permitting a slender wanderer to win on the 4th. He rejoices excessively, and she topples him with a wrist flick. He lands in the straw smiling, with a bread loaf in his pocket that wasn't his before. You start to grasp that the games fulfill a communal role. This isn't merely releasing tension, it's connection, status formation, even pairing. Individuals court via challenges, test fidelity through wagers, and evaluate one another over dice and poor wordplay. You witness 2 men clasping hands with elaborate bows after a prolonged riddle contest. The solution was an egg, evidently. It's perpetually an egg. Not all is equitable, though. You overhear a complaint that a visitor with foreign currency was deceived earlier, challenged to consume something dubbed dragon's breath. It proved vinegar, and crushed garlic matured with perhaps an insect. He retched and lost his footwear. Lesson absorbed. Distrust a man in a hat resembling former drapery. Still, there's shared vulnerability. Everyone's somewhat exposed here, whether from drink, game, or general interpersonal bewilderment. You've already discovered more about the adjacent man than desired, including his once wedding a woman to settle a bet, and annulling it upon learning her sibling was a bishop. Extended tale. One especially captivating game involves a foul, a blindfold, and abundant shouting. The guidelines aren't evident, and you're fairly certain they're invented ongoing. The fowl flees midway, nipping ankles and causing 2 cups to spill. It is, all concur, the evening's peak. You recline and inhale deeply. The blend of odors: roasted flesh, smoke, sweat, aged ale, and perhaps something ablaze, is strangely soothing now. The sounds wash over you like tides. The mirth, the dares, the fleeting drama bursts. Someone drops a stringed instrument, emitting a sound like a perishing feline. The group cheers regardless. Even as the games continue, there's a strand of prudence. Nobody draws a blade. Nobody stakes their dwelling. There are implicit boundaries, and the alewife upholds them with a gaze or a well-placed broom shaft. It's enjoyable, but not anarchic. disordered but bounded, like medieval cushioned carts. You recognize you're grinning despite the eel, despite the adhesive surface, despite the clamor and absurdity, and the concerning count of already unconscious patrons. It's enjoyable, it's authentic, it's unrefined and human, and oddly lovely. And as someone calls for another bout of guess the mug's contents, you recognize the evening is far from concluded. Your sense of time has utterly dissolved. Hours have elapsed, or perhaps mere moments, and the tavern still pulses with vitality like a breathing, gasping creature. The air is warmer now, heavy with chuckles, and warmth emanating from bodies pressed close. Someone briefly opens the door, admitting a chill breeze and the distinct odor of damp equine. The space grumbles at the cold and swiftly closes gaps, restoring heat via collective exhalations and ale-warmed physiques. And throughout, the drinks persist. There's no final call in a medieval tavern, no abrupt cutoff or harsh illumination. The evening's flow is governed by the occupants, their endurance, remaining funds, and snoring volume upon finally collapsing into their cups. Currently, nobody's yielding. In fact, it's grown more animated somehow. The cluster by the hearth has initiated an improvised percussion using vessels, utensils, and the table. Another individual performs a lone jig resembling a battle with unseen insects. And here's where matters turn peculiar. You observe that several individuals, evidently seasoned residents, aren't merely merry. They're thoroughly impaired, and they commenced the evening thus. You blink. How are they conscious? You lean toward a man slurring a rhyme about a sheep and inquire his arrival time. This morning, he boasts, dispensing another cup flawlessly. That's when it dawns. In the Middle Ages, drinking wasn't confined to evenings. For many, it begins at dawn. The morning measure isn't mere indulgence. It's routine, alongside hardened bread and barley gruel. Small ale, they term it, a milder, lightly matured drink with sufficient alcohol to sanitize and enough substance to prevent collapse in the fields. Youngsters consume it. Elders consume it. Expectant mothers consume it. All. You envision commencing each day with ale rather than brew. Abruptly, much of the tavern's conduct clarifies. Indeed, you hear accounts of laborers requesting stronger morning drafts on chilly days to heat their veins. Farmhands sip while yoking oxen. Builders drink amid stacking rocks. Even monastics in cloisters frequently prepare their own morning ales, merely with added devotion. You recall the typical medieval individual might ingest over a gallon of beer daily. Not from revelry, but scarcity of alternatives. Pure water is dubious. Milk curdles, wine costs dearly. Ale is dependable, affordable, locally made. Thus, morning imbibing exists, and with it emerges a fresh intoxication category, the daytime buzz. Across the space, you spot a man sprawled in a corner, snoring so robustly he's nearly sinking with the violin. Beside him, a younger man sips cautiously, gaze distant yet wistful. That's the midday dip. The stage where the hum mellows into a full-body vibration and individuals begin napping. Occasionally, mid-dialogue, and nobody reacts. Falling asleep amid your ale is standard, anticipated even. The alewife nudges a dozing trader to accommodate a newcomer, pocketing coins seamlessly. No criticism, just turnover. You overhear a tale from a wrinkled shoemaker about a baker dismissed for tumbling into his dough while impaired on morning ale. Rose-patterned bread it was, he chuckles, tasted of remorse and dried fruit. These anecdotes exceed tavern chatter, their cultural standards. Most accept drunkenness as natural, particularly if moderated. Mild impairment is even deemed beneficial by some, strengthening the vitality, they term it. And while scorn exists for the profoundly messy, like the man presently expelling into a vacant boot, being mildly affected all day is unremarkable. You begin contemplating how integral drinking is to the medieval lifestyle, not merely as habit, but as daily pattern. It's interlaced with labor, meals, rituals, even penalties. You hear of settlements fining in ale measures rather than currency. Some employers compensate partly in drink. He receives a jug and a half per load, says a woman nearby, gesturing to a soot-streaked man who might be part chimney. As you sip your recent cup something tasting of cider and spices, you ponder if the true distinction between medieval and contemporary intoxication isn't quantity, but attitude. Today, it's celebration or flaw. Then it's merely existence, like hunger or chill or fatigue from toil. All cycle through it. Some arrive sooner. That said, a boundary exists, and you're nearing it swiftly. Your arms feel unnaturally elongated. Your head warms in the odd manner preceding profound insight or abrupt oblivion. The man adjacent munches an onion like fruit. You've forgotten the day. You are, as locals might phrase, graced by the cup. The space swirls onward. Tunes, fire glow, murmurs, remote eructations. Someone initiates a clapping pattern. Others participate. You do too. It's innate. You don't know the melody, but it's irrelevant. The beat seizes your chest like an extra pulse. People sing, stamp, chuckle. A sudden crash as a chair yields under a man double its mass. Nobody aids him, but they replenish his cup. And just as you think the vigor will stabilize, someone tolls a bell. A genuine handheld chime, shaken vigorously by a tall woman with beet-red cheeks and twinkling eyes. "Midnight amusement," she proclaims, or as near as we estimate. A hurrah rises. You've entered the inebriated resurgence, a stage powered by equivalent fermented hope and utter disregard for dawn. She outlines rules for a game termed Name 3 Transgressions, involving imbibing, yelling, and accusing suspects of dubious conduct. The initial sin cited is consuming sacred bread for breakfast. The second is pilfering a neighbor's swine and claiming it returned voluntarily. You suggest whistling during worship. Someone proposes enjoying one's own tunes. The assembly erupts in mock outrage. You're impaired, very impaired. Perhaps daytime impaired, merely delayed by 12 hours, but you're still engaged. The alewife passes, eyes you with a look saying, "Don't expire on my floor." You nod gravely. You've hours remaining, likely. You're midst your next cup when a palm slams beside you, jolting your drowsy mind alert. You gaze up into the deeply creased, reddened visage of a man in a hooded robe, coarse, cinched with cord. His cheeks are flushed, his eyes veined, and he reeks of salted fish and holy intent. "Shift over, friend," he says with a smile blending sanctity and scandal. The divine supplies, but you're monopolizing the seat. You slide aside naturally, as one doesn't debate clerics, especially intoxicated ones. This man is a friar, or so he asserts, and given his worn sandals and rhyming scripture fragments between sips, you're prone to accept. He flings back his hood theatrically, exposing a balding crown ringed by unkempt hair, fluffing like a weary lion. I've trekked 30 miles this week, he declares as if queried. My transgressions are dusty and my spirit thirsty. A server, possibly the one who tumbled into the flames earlier, delivers his drink preemptively. You sense this isn't his debut. The friar elevates his cup in a formal salute. To the maiden, to St. Arnold, and to barley's sacred grace. Then he gulps deeply, sighs extendedly, and whispers about heavenly maturation. You raise yours in reply, feeling somewhat pious by association. You might not envision monks and holy figures as regular tavern patrons, but they certainly are. The notion that the devout lead strictly austere, abstinent lives, secluded in silent stone chambers, praying and abstaining while mildly condemning, is only partial truth. In medieval Europe, clerical imbibers abound. Monks produce their own beer, some yielding the most refined and powerful libations regionally. Monasteries frequently operate as autonomous ventures, and brewing is both spiritual obligation and thriving ancillary enterprise. Consequently, men of faith with superior beer than most, and occasionally less restraint than anticipated. The friar beside you is on his 4th cup, nonchalantly citing St. Augustine amid burps. Lord, grant me purity, he says, but not immediately. He winks. You don't know if he's jesting or if it's authentic. It likely is. Down the seat, a pilgrim with dust-coated boots attempts to vend a relic, purportedly St. Benedict's knuckle. It's oddly sizable and equine-like. He displays it, slurring about celestial safeguard, while a small group debates if he's fraudulent, impaired, or both. A woman bids 2 silver pieces and a melody in trade. He consents. All applaud. These pilgrims and monks aren't merely tolerated in the tavern. They're often integral to the social weave. Pilgrimages, after all, aren't solely spiritual voyages. They're vast communal occasions filled with trekking, singing, exchanging tales, sampling odd cuisine, and yes, copious drinking. The tavern is where pilgrims ease their sore feet, recount exaggerated stories of artifacts and wonders, and if fortunate, coax locals from their meals. You observe as a small cluster assembles near the hearth, heeding a woman describe her journey to Canterbury. She asserts she witnessed a man cured by a plume from Archangel Gabriel's wing. The friar scoffs but doesn't contest. He's occupied with another's remnants. And then there's the choir. You weren't anticipating it. But abruptly, 3 men in loose garments rise, elevate their cups, and commence a melody. Not a drunken ditty, but something nearly celestial. Latin, you surmise, harmonized, astonishingly lovely. The entire tavern hushes momentarily, all partially suspended in the tune, partially holding drinks aloft. Upon conclusion, the space erupts in acclaim and slurred affirmations. Apparently, they're from a nearby cathedral, unwinding post-Holy Day. 1 foot in paradise, 1 in the mire. One shrugs, draining his vessel. You're beginning to comprehend that for medieval folk, spiritual and alcoholic pursuits aren't opposing. They're profoundly linked. The sacred is never distant from the tavern threshold, just as transgression is never far from the altar. Clerics preach moderation, then salute at nuptial feasts. Monks brew for benevolence, then sample for assurance. Saints caution against overindulgence, yet they're invoked for reliable fermentation. There's even a marginal conviction you hear from a hobbling mason by the window that imbibing with a monk yields partial absolution, a divine shortcut. If the one who consecrates the ale also partakes, he murmurs, it's like atonement in a vessel. You're unsure theologically, but it's sufficient for this group. You and the friar salute again, this time honoring Saint Brigid, beer patroness. He claims she once transformed bathwater into ale for visiting clerics. You believe him? You desire to. Another man joins. A deacon, he professes, in a slightly soiled garment with a cross stitched in the corner. He carries his own oak cup, etched with what might be scripture or mere waves. He disputes the friar on ale versus wine ethics, citing ancient text. They concur to differ and imbibe synchronously. You're now at what feels the most sacred drinking circle in town. They consume with intent or philosophy, with practiced pace. One initiates a game called Saint or Sinner, naming a room occupant and debating their afterlife. Someone indicates the man gnawing his bootlace. Sinner, the consensus. Definitely. It's ridiculous and somewhat lovely. Even in stupor, the monks and clergy hold authority. People heed them, jest with them, and sometimes seek counsel. One woman queries the friar if she should wed the miller's son. Can he sing? The friar asks. Like a toad, she replies. Then no, he proclaims. The space laughs. She bows deeply and departs as if that's definitive. The evening assumes a surreal quality. Candles dim. The fire reduces to coals. You're dizzy, drowsy, and somewhat awed. You began this night viewing medieval taverns as filthy chaos hubs, and they are. But they're also sites of fellowship, shared delight, odd holy disorder. As the friar launches into a hallelujah, slurring the refrain and sporadically inserting farm sounds, you shut your eyes and rest your brow against your cup's rim. Somewhere rearward, someone tolls a small bell again, likely without cause. And just like that, you've arrived at the hazy crossroads of belief and brewing. At some point, you notice the friar has vanished. One instant, he's directing a round of what resembled a hymn, but included dubious turnip references, and the next, he's absent. Perhaps he ascended on a cloud of mead-infused virtue. Or maybe he crawled beneath a bench and deemed it adequate rest. Either way, the void leaves a brief quiet around you. And then someone commences singing. Not a chant, not a hymn, and certainly not in tune. It begins as a toneless hum from the hearth, swells into a sturdy melody from a second voice near the entrance, and finally becomes a full, disorderly chorus of inebriated spirits, leaning into a medieval drinking song, as if it's the sole thing they collectively recall besides swallowing ale. Bring us the ale, the good strong ale that sings through the nose and bends the tail. The lyrics differ by singer. Some verses feature legendary creatures. Others reference large, scandalous anatomy. One man, possibly ad-libbing, belts a detailed grievance about his landlord to the melody of Greensleeves. You don't know the words, but you hum along regardless. It's that sort of evening. In the Middle Ages, songs and drink are inseparable, and not just gentle ballads around a fire. We're talking crude, uproarious, inventively indecent lyrics, handed down like cherished heirlooms. The kind that lodge in your mind for weeks and would definitely get you expelled from a modern chorus. A man nearby pounds the table rhythmically, providing a beat for all. The song shifts again, this time about a milkmaid and a priest, and neither emerges virtuous in the tale. Laughter bursts at the chorus, and you catch Middle English phrases that sound improper, even untranslated. Something about a goose and an unfortunate mix-up with a churn. It's loud, it's wild, and it's communal in the purest form. These songs aren't performed so much as unleashed, bellowed with crooked grins, half-recalled rhymes, and unapologetic mispronunciations. People slap backs, laugh mid-verse, and sometimes forget the words entirely. When that happens, they invent new ones. The goal isn't precision, it's volume. You spot a woman near the fire, leading the room through an obvious favorite and old drinking round in Latin, possibly once sung by scholars at a monastery, before being twisted by generations of ale and mischief. She gestures dramatically with her mug, voice gravelly but commanding. Everyone joins, mangling the Latin with drunken grace. Gaudiamus igitur, juvenes dum sumus. Let us rejoice while we are young. It's hard not to smile. You're witnessing language, religion, music, and total nonsense collide in real time. And somehow it works. It's equal parts liturgical and ludicrous. A symphony conducted by collective inebriation and sheer willpower. You remember that literacy is low in the medieval world, especially among commoners. Most can't read scripture, or even the tavern slate where someone scrawled, "No shoes, no credit," in poor Latin. But they know the songs. These drinking tunes are how stories are transmitted, morals taught, scandals shared. Songs fill the role that books do now, only with more innuendo and occasional hiccups. You hear one man recite a bawdy poem from memory, complete with hand gestures and details suggesting he's either a superb performer or experienced the events firsthand. It's about a monk, a donkey, and an ill-timed thunderstorm. The ending is lost to laughter. Someone demands a repeat. He agrees, but only if another sings next. Another takes the stage, if standing on a wobbly bench counts as a stage, and starts a tune about alewives and their ability to outdrink kings. It's catchy, the rhymes are clever. The refrain involves lots of foot stomping and a sound that might be deliberate snorting. You're pulled into the rhythm before you can protest. You clap, shout, sing. The tavern becomes a single organism, buzzing, howling, hiccuping in three-part harmony. And in that moment, you start to understand the power of the tavern song. It's not just entertainment, it's release, it's identity. It's the closest thing some of these people get to therapy, to storytelling, to self-expression. There's a deep emotional truth woven into the ridiculousness. Even in the dirtiest rhymes, there are hints of fear, hope, longing. One ballad about a knight who can't stay on his horse because he's drunk. It's secretly about war trauma. A song about a girl who drinks all her father's mead and ends up married to a pig farmer. That's probably a cautionary tale and a commentary on gender roles if you're sober enough to think about it. You're not. And then someone sings a sad one, a slow, mournful tune about a lost lover and a winter that never ended. The room quiets. No one asks for it to stop. Even the loudmouth near the window, the one who tried to arm wrestle a chicken earlier, nods solemnly with the beat. This one's in the local dialect, thick and old, but you feel it more than understand it. It settles over the room like a blanket soaked in snow. The song ends. There's no applause, just silence and one soft murmur of "again." The singer doesn't repeat it, though. He sips his drink and stares into the fire, and the moment passes. It's followed naturally by a return to filth. The song of the night. The Cobbler's Wife, a notorious drinking tune filled with euphemisms, bad puns, and a final verse so anatomically confusing it sparks a heated and very drunk debate over what exactly a sticky Stilton is supposed to symbolize. Someone suggests it's just cheese. Someone else insists it's a metaphor for a treacherous marriage. You decide to nod and sip, a fringe belief you overhear during the lull. Singing after drinking prevents possession. One old woman mutters it into her mug, warning that silence after heavy ale invites spirits. The laughter that follows is mostly nervous. Someone starts humming immediately, just in case. You hum too. As the songs continue, your head begins to feel like it's full of bees. Friendly bees, drunk bees, but buzzing. Your limbs have stopped belonging entirely to you. Your face is sore from smiling. And still you stay because leaving now would be like walking out of a fever dream before the last verse. You need to see how this ends. One final round begins, led by a toothless shepherd with the lungs of a cathedral bell. It's about a fox who outdrinks an entire village. You don't follow all the lyrics, but you join in for the chorus anyway. Fill it, spill it, curse and cheer. Sing for the fox and pour the beer. Your voice blends with the others, rough, out of tune, half forgotten, but whole. You're drunk, you're hoarse, and you're exactly where you need to be. It creeps in slowly, like fog over a moor, or the instant before a sneeze. The realization that the tavern smells indescribable, not bad necessarily, not in the way a modern dive bar smells after someone spills a rum and coke behind the radiator. This is more primal, layered, the kind of smell you don't just notice, but experience. And once you do, you can't unsmell it. It's everywhere. You shift slightly on your bench, only to realize the bench is damp. Not fresh ale damp. No, this is the kind of damp that suggests the wood itself has absorbed centuries of human suffering. You can almost hear its sighs as you adjust your weight. Around you, the smells rise in a complex medieval bouquet. Sweat, unwashed, weeks old, yeasty ale funk, the rich musk of livestock, and something tangy that might be pickled herring or someone's feet, possibly both. You try breathing through your mouth, but it doesn't help. That just gives you taste smell, which is worse. Medieval taverns don't come with ventilation. There are no overhead fans, no open concept layouts, just smoke-blackened beams, and tiny windows so caked with soot they may as well be painted shut. The hearth helps with warmth, yes, but it also fills the air with a low-level haze. It's not unpleasant at first. Wood smoke always has a romantic edge, but by your 10th hour, your eyes sting. Your clothes have taken on the scent of a bonfire, and your lungs feel fuzzy. You glance up and notice cobwebs. Not tucked away in the corner cobwebs. Statement cobwebs, the kind that look like they've been grandfathered in by time and possibly have diplomatic immunity. A spider the size of a coin calmly observes the crowd from its perch above the door. You give it a respectful nod. A man near you removes his shoes. You didn't know he was wearing any until this moment. The release of his feet into the air is a chemical event. You cough discreetly. He doesn't notice. In fact, someone else nearby does the same. You wonder if this is a cultural thing. It's possible the locals associate taking your boots off with reaching peak comfort. Or maybe they're airing out their toes to avoid trench rot. Hard to say. And then someone lights a pipe. The smell shifts again. Now it's sweet, pungent, herby. You catch a note of something sharp, almost citrusy. The pipe makes its way around the table. When it reaches you, you're not entirely sure what's in it. Probably not tobacco. Probably not legal by modern standards. You take a puff. It tastes like moss, honey, and regret. You pass it on. This is the olfactory reality of medieval tavern life. There's no air freshener, no cleaning schedule. If the rushes on the floor are changed once a season, that's considered overachieving. Most people don't bathe regularly, and even if they do, it's not enough to fight the daily coating of dust, animal grease, and human proximity. You've been here for hours, and you already feel like your pores have absorbed the entire atmosphere. You're pretty sure you'll carry this smell home with you forever. The animals don't help. Yes, there are animals. You hear a goat bleating softly behind a partition. Chickens occasionally strut through the tavern like tiny drunks in feathered suits. No one questions it. Animals are part of life here, and that life is very indoorsy. One man keeps a ferret on a leash. Another has a hawk perched on his shoulder. You don't ask questions. You've stopped asking anything at this point. You just accept it like everything else. You lean back, trying to find a less sticky spot on the wall. No luck. Every surface is layered with grime and a glossy film of decades of communal use. The table in front of you has carvings etched deep into its surface. Names, tally marks, crude symbols, and what may be the earliest known drawing of someone mooning the king. As the hours drag on, the scent landscape deepens. Roasting meat, some kind of game. Judging by the smell adds a savory note to the air. Then there's spilled ale fermenting in puddles under benches. Every so often, someone knocks over a mug, and the contents seep into the floor like an offering to the gods of decay. You can't escape it. It's in your hair, your clothes, your soul. It's not one smell. It's 1,000 tiny smells forming a symphony of human existence, a medieval funk. You wonder if people back then noticed it the way you do, or if they were simply used to living with their own human marinade. Probably the latter. One man proudly announces he hasn't bathed since the feast of St. Martin. No one reacts. You're not surprised. Someone offers you a hunk of cheese. You accept out of politeness. It's hard, salty, and emits a smell that could strip paint. You chew slowly, resisting the urge to cry. Cheese in the Middle Ages isn't mild. It's a test of courage, a flavor that punches first and apologizes never. A woman passes by with a bowl of what looks like onions and lard. It smells better than the cheese. Sort of. You don't ask for a sample, and then, just when you think you've acclimated, a chamber pot is emptied not nearby, somewhere in the back. You hear the slosh, the scrape of a door, and the unmistakable sound of contents being poured into the alley. A warm breeze wafts it inside. The room groans. A man by the fire mutters something about God's vengeance. The tavern's hygiene, or lack thereof, is both legendary and entirely expected. Sanitation isn't a priority. Disease is a constant background threat, sure, but it's not blamed on filth. People believe illness comes from imbalances in humors, bad air, or divine punishment, not dirty rushes or moldy mugs. That makes smell less a problem and more a normal part of the sensory background. You're not supposed to enjoy it. You're supposed to survive it. You catch wind of a fringe superstition from a baker leaning on a stool leg that's clearly seen better centuries. He tells you that bad smells ward off evil spirits. They hate garlic and pig fat, he whispers, tapping his nose. That's why I wear the same tunic all week. You nod solemnly, as though this is the most reasonable explanation you've ever heard. Despite everything, the goats stink, the breathy pipe smoke, the smell of fear, and possibly raw turnip you stay. Because at some point, smell becomes background music. Your senses have dulled. Your standards have dropped. You've become one with the tavern, stinky, sticky, and still drinking. And honestly, you've smelled worse things like that time earlier when someone pulled out pickled eggs and left them open for 20 minutes. You survived that. You'll survive this, maybe. Your eyes start to water, not from emotion, just the air. But you raise your mug anyway, toast to nothing in particular, and drink. Because if you're going down in a haze of smoke, cheese, sweat, and glory. There's a low shout from the back of the tavern, a hoarse, slurred voice that sounds more like a cough with ambition than anything intelligible. You don't catch the words, but the shift in the room's energy is immediate and sharp. Conversations stop. Mugs are slowly lowered. Someone mutters, "Not again." You're still blinking dumbly at your ale when a wooden chair flies across the room and crashes into the wall, splinters spraying like angry confetti. Ah, so it's that part of the night. Brawls in medieval taverns are less like sudden eruptions and more like weather systems. You can feel them coming. The tension builds over time through spilled drinks, muttered insults, maybe the fifth retelling of a joke that stopped being funny 3 ales ago. There's often a tipping point, a misunderstood gesture, a glance held too long, or someone reaching for someone else's mug with the wrong kind of enthusiasm. This time, it starts between 2 men you vaguely remember from earlier, one with a scar down his cheek and the other with eyebrows that look permanently surprised. You don't know what started it. No one ever does. But suddenly, they're both on their feet, shouting in dialects that may as well be spells. One swings, the other ducks. A bench goes over. A mug flies. Chaos takes the wheel. You lean back just in time to avoid a crashing elbow and a splash of mystery liquid. It smells like vinegar and possibly regret. You don't ask. The tavern comes alive in a whole new way. It's no longer a place of music and ale, but of elbows and cursing, and the occasional very creative insult involving someone's mother and a goat. A few regulars move away casually, mugs in hand, like they've seen this movie before and know how it ends. Others watch with glee, cheering like it's a sport. One man stands on a bench to get a better view. Someone bets a boiled egg on the man with the scar. And amid the chaos, Maud, ever the eternal, battle-weary alewife, does not panic. She does not shout. She simply picks up her broom, marches into the fray, and smacks both men across the backs of their heads with a precision honed through years of tavern management and possibly battlefield experience. The broom is the tavern equivalent of divine intervention. The fighting slows, one man wobbles, the other sits down, blinking like he forgot why he was standing. Maud points the broom at them both and says something short, sharp, and profoundly final. Neither man responds. They just nod. It's over. Just like that. You exhale, shoulders unclenching. Tavern brawls are messy but weirdly structured. Everyone knows the unspoken rules. No weapons, no killing, and absolutely no breaking the big jug by the fire. Fists, mugs, and the occasional slap are fair game. The brawlers rarely hold a grudge. By morning, they'll be nursing hangovers and comparing bruises like war wounds. You hear someone mutter that these two have fought 4 times this month. And last week, they sang a duet afterward. But not every tavern scuffle is so neatly resolved. You learn from a butcher across the table who's calmly eating something that looks like boiled tongue, that in rougher places, brawls escalate quickly. Knives come out, teeth come out. One tavern in a nearby village even keeps a designated fight table. A reinforced slab of wood stained with so much blood, it's practically ceremonial. Better than the floor, the butcher says with a shrug, chewing slowly. And when someone does draw steel, things change. That's when the authorities get involved or not. Some towns have constables who'll drag you out by the hair and toss you in the stocks. Others rely on informal justice, like the alewife tossing you out into the street, or worse, banning you from the tavern altogether. You hear that's how one man ended up drinking alone behind the tannery for a year. Poor bastard, someone says, had to talk to his own thoughts. You also learn about the chamber pot incident, so it's whispered about with reverence and horror. Apparently, during a brawl last year, one particularly creative woman climbed the stairs to the loft above, fetched a full chamber pot, and upended it on the brawlers below. The fight ended instantly. One man sobbed, another left town. To this day, the smell of rosemary used, later to cleanse the floor triggers, violent flinching in several regulars. You file this away under Do Not Mess with the Upstairs Patrons. Right on cue, a heavy clay jug thuds onto the table next to you. You look up to see the barmaid, flushed, wild-eyed, slightly limping, grinning as she places a small dish of what might be dried plums or might be someone's failed cooking experiment. "For the nerves," she says. You nod as if that makes sense and sip the new drink. It tastes like spiced apple, soot, and a little bit of courage. Not bad. The brawlers are now back at the table, laughing. One has a black eye blooming like a fresh bruise bouquet. The other is missing a sleeve. Someone puts an arm around both and declares them blood brothers in barley. They toast. Everyone toasts. And just like that, the tavern resets. It's uncanny how quickly things return to normal. The music picks up again. Someone's plucking a lute in the corner, badly but enthusiastically. Dice rattle back onto the table. Someone jokes about starting a brawl league, and assigning points for creativity. Another man volunteers to be a judge, but only if bribed with cheese. You notice that the rules of the tavern are fluid but enforced, not by laws, but by custom, by community, by the quiet pressure of reputation. If you're a known troublemaker, people stop drinking with you. If you pick fights too often, Maud bans you or feeds you the special stew. No one talks about what's in it. Everyone respects it. And if you really cross the line, say you knock over a full barrel or insult someone's dead grandmother, you might find yourself tossed outside face first into the mud, your shoes missing, and your dignity running off in the opposite direction. The tavern doesn't forget, but it does forgive if you earn it. As the fire crackles and the laughter resumes, you settle back into your corner, your heart still thumping from the brief adrenaline spike. You raise your mug to your lips and take a long, calming sip. The drink is warmer now, a little flatter, but still good, still yours. And around you, the tavern breathes again, smoky, rowdy, and utterly alive. You're mid-sip, enjoying the afterglow of post-brawl calm, when a man in a fine doublet with a crushed feather in his hat stumbles past your table and drops a coin into someone's soup. He doesn't notice. He just keeps going, bumping into a chair, then a stool, then a wall like a pinball made of lace and entitlement. You watch, slightly mesmerized, as he attempts to flirt with the barmaid by quoting a poem, and then forgets the ending halfway through, replacing the last line with, "And your eyes look like old fish." This is how you meet the drunk tax collector. Nobody seems particularly thrilled about his presence. A few mutters ripple through the room, and one old man with a scarred lip mutters something like, "God protect my goats." You're about to ask what that means when the tax collector returns, wobbling toward the center of the room, arms raised as though inviting applause. "I," he slurs proudly, "am here for the betterment of your kingdom, your purse, and your, well, whatever's left of your pigs." He tries to bow. He does not succeed. Here's the thing about tax collectors in medieval towns. They aren't just paper pushers. They're collectors in the most literal sense. They walk door to door, tavern to tavern, field to muddy field, shaking people down for whatever the crown, church, or local lord says is owed, and they get a cut, which means they're incentivized to squeeze hard. This one, apparently, has decided to make his rounds after several too many rounds of ale. You wonder if this is strategy lower resistance when people are too drunk to argue, or if he's simply riding the edge of corruption and incompetence, like a particularly determined squirrel on a grease-coated fence. He announces that he's collecting the malt tax, then the ale duty, then something called bench occupation fee. People look at each other, eyebrows raised. Most ignore him. A few toss him copper coins out of habit or guilt, or just to make him go away. One woman throws him a bone literally, and he bows as though he's been knighted. He finally reaches your table, breath like boiled cabbage and fermented apples. He leans down and taps your mug with a single damp finger. "Drinking tax," he declares. You open your mouth, unsure whether to argue or laugh, but before you can say a word, he points at your bread crust. "And chewing tax?" he adds. "Very expensive premium chewing, that is." You glance around to see if anyone else is reacting. No one is. This is clearly not his first performance. You hand him a crumb. he pockets it with a flourish. The strange part is he might actually be a legitimate tax collector. There's no uniform, no ID badge, but he does carry a small leather pouch filled with scribbled notes and what may be tally marks or just doodles of ducks. And in the corner of his parchment, you spot the royal seal faint, but real. Somehow, against all reason, this man represents the crown. Possibly. Another man nearby, broad-shouldered, and clearly fed up calls out, "Oi, you took my pig tithe twice last month, you thieving porridge!" The tax collector raises his arms in mock offense, stumbles backward, and bumps directly into a support beam. The barmaid shouts, "No dying against the timber. We just had it reinforced." He slides down the beam like melting wax, muttering, "Misunderstood genius." Despite his incompetence, or maybe because of it, he's tolerated. Loathed, yes, but tolerated. That's often the way with local taxmen in this era. They walk the line between authority and public nuisance. No one likes them, but pushing them too far means inviting trouble from someone higher up the chain. And you don't want to draw attention from someone whose idea of due process involves shackles and cold stew. Still, not everyone plays along. You overhear the table next to you debating whether this tax collector is real or just a drunk with good stationery. One man, red-faced and wild-eyed, insists he saw the same guy try to collect a song tax from a farmer's donkey last week. "The donkey kicked him," he says proudly. "That was the sound of justice." There's also talk of tax evasion techniques, most of them hilariously ineffective. One woman claims she keeps her coins in a hollow turnip to avoid detection. Another says she fakes possession by demons anytime an official asks about her grain store. "They don't tax the damned," she winks. "Too messy." And naturally, there's a fringe theory floating around the tavern that some tax collectors aren't even human. "They're sent by the king's alchemist," someone whispers, "made from bones and lard and programmed to sniff out coin." You nod solemnly. That makes as much sense as anything else tonight. Meanwhile, your friendly neighborhood collector is now attempting to climb onto a table to deliver what he calls a policy announcement. Neno, it starts with, "Henceforth, all drinking mugs must be registered by moonlight," and ends with him stepping on a spoon and face-planting into someone's stew. No one moves to help him. The barmaid walks over, takes the pouch off his belt, removes a few coins, and tosses it back beside his head. "That's for the broken spoon," she mutters. 10 minutes later, he's snoring softly against the side of the hearth, hat pulled over his face, hands clutching a crust of bread like it's legal tender. You're not sure if he's asleep, unconscious, or simply paused. Either way, the tavern slowly returns to its rhythm. The fiddler tunes up again. Dice clatter. Someone pours you another drink with a grin and says, "First one's free, second one's taxed, third one's blessed." You drink to that. What strikes you most about all of this isn't the absurdity, it's the normality of it. This is how systems work here: chaotic, messy, reliant on reputation, personality, and a certain tolerance for nonsense. People joke about taxes in verse, pay in goat cheese, and file complaints by shouting them at clouds. And somehow the world turns anyway. You look at the man still passed out near the hearth, soup drying in his beard, and wonder if he'll wake up remembering anything. Probably not. But his pouch will be lighter, his reputation slightly worse, and his feather permanently soggy. And honestly, you've seen worse bureaucrats. At some point in the middle of the night, when time turns to soup and the walls feel like they're gently pulsing, you're handed a mug of something new. It's handed to you by a grinning man with no front teeth and the overly proud air of someone about to ruin your internal organs. "Try this," he says, like a curse or a challenge. "Just brewed, stronger than a confession, and twice as honest." You raise it to your lips, already a little suspicious. It smells sharp. There's an herbaceous undertone like wet grass, but it's drowned in a sour-sweet punch of something that makes your eyes water before the mug even touches your mouth. You take a sip anyway, because bad decisions are really just adventures in disguise, and instantly feel your tongue recoil, curl, and contemplate resignation. This is not ale. This is Groot, or something close to it. An older, more chaotic cousin of beer brewed without hops, and instead flavored with a mix of herbs that may or may not double as spell ingredients. Before hops became widespread in European brewing, Groot was the go-to, and its composition was completely unregulated. You got whatever the brewer had on hand: bog myrtle, yarrow, wild rosemary, mugwort, sage, sometimes even henbane, which, by the way, can cause hallucinations and potentially a brief meeting with the afterlife. The man watches you closely as you swallow. "Bit of wormwood in that one," he says proudly. "Clears the thoughts or replaces them." Your tongue has gone a bit numb. That seems normal. You glance down into the mug. It's dark, cloudy, and sloshes in a way that feels accusatory. This isn't a drink. This is a brew with ambition. You take another sip because you're already in the river might as well swim. The second one isn't better, but it is warmer. Across the room, other mugs clink with different concoctions. Not every tavern drink is ale or Groot. Some brew herbal wines, spiked ciders, and regional oddities with names like black toe or throat coat that sound more like medieval injuries than beverages. Recipes change tavern to tavern, brewer to brewer. One innkeeper might swear by dried juniper berries. Another might favor fermented bread crusts and boiled cabbage. You ask someone about their drink, and they say it's made from soaked oats, goose fat, and a memory of honey. You nod like that's not horrifying. The truth is, ingredients are flexible, and so are the results. You hear about a brew that once made a bishop speak fluent Flemish for a week, despite never having left Wessex. Another caused a man to smell purple for 3 days. No one even pretends to keep recipes consistent. Half the fun is seeing what happens. Each mug is a gamble. You might get pleasantly buzzed. You might meet your ancestors. Someone next to you offers a thimble of something amber and thick. Smells like burnt sugar and pine. "Distilled," they whisper, as if sharing a secret. Distilling alcohol in the Middle Ages is still new, mostly practiced in monasteries and apothecaries. But every now and then, some ambitious brewer makes an aqua vitae, or water of life, which tastes like what fire feels like in your throat. You sip, you regret. Your vision sharpens and blurs at the same time. Then there's the weird stuff. A man at the next table has a clay pot with a lid. He removes it dramatically and reveals a sludgy gray liquid. "Turnip mead," he announces. Someone claps. Someone else gags. You're offered a taste. You decline. He shrugs and downs it himself with the commitment of a martyr. There's even boozy broth, a warm, soup-like drink laced with ale and herbs. You're told it's for the constitution. It smells like stew, and beer had an argument, and no one won. One sip, and you understand why people in this era have a very casual relationship with digestion. In the far corner, someone's trying to make their own cocktail mixing leftover dregs from several mugs into a tin cup and adding a pickled onion for flair. Alchemist's elixir, they call it, guaranteed to either heal your soul or ruin your marriage. You learn very quickly that sketchy ingredients are just part of the deal. There's no labeling, no purity law, and certainly no concern about allergens. If you're allergic to ragweed or clover or manticore tears, well, good luck. You're drinking whatever survived fermentation and didn't grow fur in the barrel. That's not to say people are careless. They just have different standards. A brew might include animal bones for strength, or charred bread for color, or even a splash of fish sauce for body. Spices are precious, though, and if you taste cinnamon, someone probably pawned a family heirloom to afford it. You overhear a small debate at the table next to you. One man insists that adding sage wards off liver rot. Another claims nettle improves vision. A third insists that the secret is to leave a silver coin in the barrel overnight to kill off evil spirits. This quickly devolves into an argument about whether coins or leeches are more effective purifiers. You finish your mug before you find out who wins. The fringe theory of the night. Certain brews brewed on specific days, especially during a full moon or after a lunar eclipse, carry intentions. One man tells you in a voice lowered to a reverent whisper that he once drank a moon-fermented cider and couldn't stop speaking in riddles for 3 days. You're not sure if he's lying or if the cider's working right now. As the drinks keep flowing, so does the conversation less coherent now, more dreamlike. Someone tells you that their aunt once made a mead with spider legs and acorns to ward off melancholy. Another swears their grandfather used to test new brews by giving them to the dog first. If the dog danced, it was good. If the dog slept, it was strong. If the dog vanished, it was best left unnamed. You're somewhere between sleepy and vibrating. Your fingertips feel distant. Your tongue is doing its best impression of wool, but the room is warm, full of laughter and clinking mugs, and the occasional burp that registers on a spiritual level. And still, someone slides another drink your way. "Try this," they say. "It's got cloves, apples, and a little something I can't pronounce." You raise the mug, knowing full well it might contain thyme, tar, or mild poison. You drink anyway, because if you're going to go down, it might as well be in a vat of bubbling, mystery-stewed medieval madness. You're not sure if you're still seated, or if your body has simply fused with the bench. The sensation of your limbs has drifted into that warm, spongy realm where everything feels both distant and strangely tingly, like you're being slowly pickled from the inside out. The mug in your hand is now just a friendly shape, and the tavern has morphed into a swirling mass of flickering candlelight, overlapping conversations, and the ever-present sound of someone falling over. But amid this holy mess of humanity, something interesting starts to take shape. You begin to notice the details of who is in the room with you, not just their individual quirks, but their social layers. Because medieval taverns are strange places where, against all odds, people from very different walks of life occasionally share the same bench at least, until someone spills something on someone's lap and ruins the whole illusion of civility. Take the man 2 seats down, for instance. His hands are rough, his nails blackened with soot, and his boots have clearly spent more time inside mud than out. But his belt is decent leather, and his wool cloak is the kind that says, "Working man who makes decent coin." You figure he's a blacksmith. His shoulders certainly look like they could bend horseshoes into pretzels. He's deep in conversation with a woman whose clothes are plainer, patched, and sun-faded, but clean. She's probably a field worker, you guess, though her speech carries that sharp rhythm of someone who knows how to barter, how to manage livestock, and how to tell a drunk to sit down and shut up using only 3 words. Across from them sits a knight, or something close to one. He's younger than you expected, face still half boy under his scraggly beard, and clearly off duty. His surcoat is stained with travel grime, and his sword leans against the wall, tied with a scrap of cloth to keep it from clattering to the ground. His boots are too nice for a peasant. He drinks slowly, watching the room with the sort of cautious detachment that says, "I've been trained to stab people, but I'm off the clock right now." What's fascinating is that no one's treating him like royalty. He's just another warm body in the corner. Sure, a few glances slide his way, some admiring, some calculating, but mostly people leave him alone. You realize that in this room, social class matters, but not always. The tavern is one of the few spaces where class boundaries stretch a little, not disappear exactly. You're not going to find the lord of the manor arm wrestling a thatcher, but stretch. The rich may drink in separate, fancier rooms, sure, but sometimes even they find their way into common spaces when the mood or the wine hits right. And when they do, the rules shift. A merchant in a fur-lined cloak walks in next, blinking at the smoke and dodging a particularly aggressive chicken. He's clearly from the guild class, wealthier, better fed, and deeply uncomfortable with the whole situation. He orders wine because of course he does. And when told there's only ale, he tries to haggle. Maud does not haggle. He pays double and gets the same stuff as everyone else. You kind of admire that. You hear a whispered joke from someone nearby. The merchant's coin is gold, but his liver is made of cheese. It gets a few chuckles. Then there's the miller burly and flour-dusted telling loud jokes that only half the room finds funny. His laugh is contagious, though, and before long, he's bought drinks for his corner of the tavern and is performing an improvised jig that somehow includes 3 spoons and an alarming amount of thigh. In the very back, almost unnoticed, sits a man in a cloak that's too long, too dark, and too still. You don't know if he's noble or criminal or both. You don't ask. No one does. He's left alone mostly. Everyone knows that some people pay for silence with heavy coin and heavier consequences. Despite the mingling, there are still tells little signs that social class hasn't gone entirely out the window. It's in the accents, the way some folks say "me" versus "my lord." It's in how people sit, how they hold their mugs, how confidently they move through the room. You watch as a group of thatchers burly and loud shift subtly to give space when the young knight gets up to pass. Not because he asked, but because centuries of instinct told them to. But alcohol is the great equalizer. After enough mugs, people start to blur. Titles don't carry much weight when you're too drunk to say your own name. The merchant is singing now badly, but enthusiastically. The blacksmith has his arm around the field worker. The knight is arguing with the miller about the merits of oat versus barley ale, a debate that has apparently reached the pantomime phase. There's also the class of professional drinkers regulars who've turned tavern-going into a lifestyle. One old man with no teeth but 5 tankards in front of him is humming a song no one else knows. Another woman, hair tied up in a scarf, has been quietly playing cards and slowly, methodically, winning all the bread crusts at her table. These people aren't nobles or peasants or merchants. They're just part of the furniture now, woven into the walls like the smell of boiled onions. You learn from a man with a cider-stained beard that in some towns, guilds have their own taverns. Tailors have their tap rooms. Tanners drink with their own kind. You don't want to mix sweat like that, he says, poking your shoulder for emphasis. But in places like this, a crossroads in a village hub, everyone ends up under the same smoky ceiling, if only for a few hours. That's not to say it's all kumbaya and hugs. Fights still break out. Resentments simmer. Someone throws a sharp look at the knight when he brags too loudly about a fox hunt. Someone else mumbles about taxes and guild corruption. But tonight, at least, the beer is thick enough to hold those tensions down at the bottom of the mug. You raise your own drink and catch the blacksmith's eye. He raises his back. There's a moment of mutual blurry understanding. You're from different worlds, but here, right now, you're just 2 people sharing bad ale, sticky benches, and a rapidly declining sense of balance. And really, isn't that what society's all about? The blacksmith beside you leans in, eyes glossy and breath thick with barley, and says in a tone just above a whisper, "Don't toast with your left hand." You blink, unsure if you heard him correctly, and he repeats it slower this time, as if sharing an ancient and dangerous secret. Left hand bad omen, never ends well. Then he taps your mug with his right, downs what's left in one gulp, and belches like a thunderclap from the heavens. No further explanation, no follow-up. He just stares at the wall like he's remembering something that haunts him to this day. That's your introduction to tavern superstitions, a whole underworld of rules, taboos, rituals, and old wives' tales that cling to the rafters like smoke. They're rarely written down, always evolving, and entirely non-negotiable for the locals who believe in them. And whether you believe or not, you find yourself following them. Because once someone whispers that a spilled drink means someone will die unmarried, well, you're not taking chances. A woman across the room knocks her mug over, sending a puddle of weak cider across the table. The room goes quiet for a half beat. She stares down at the liquid, then solemnly drops a copper coin into the spill and mutters, "There paid the spirits." Then she calmly goes back to her conversation. You don't even question it. Turns out taverns are steeped in folklore little rituals passed down through generations like heirlooms. You learn them gradually, like social instincts. If your mug cracks, don't drink from it. It means the devil's marked it. If someone toasts without making eye contact, they're hiding something. and under no circumstances should you drink from a mug left unattended for more than 3 minutes. Could be cursed, someone says, or could be full of spit. Honestly, both seem equally plausible. The belief in spirit interference is strong. People here don't just drink with friends, they drink with the dead. Some even pour a few drops from their first mug onto the floor before they sip. For those who can't join us, they say, it's part respect, part protection. The idea is simple. If you don't give the dead their due, they'll take their revenge by souring your beer, muddling your luck, or worse, leading you to sing naked in the street until dawn. You're assured this has happened more than once. There are specific superstitions about what you drink, too. Dark ale is for mourning, pale ale for new beginnings. Mead is said to attract love, especially if brewed during a full moon. And if your drink has bubbles that cling to the side of the mug, someone is talking about you behind your back, probably your cousin. You always suspected her. Some superstitions are stranger. A man insists that you should never toast with a spoon in your pocket. You don't know why. Neither does he. It's just bad, he says with the finality of someone who once did it and barely survived. Another claims that if you drink the last sip in your mug too slowly, it invites a demon into your dreams. You take a long, decisive gulp and nod politely. You also learn about drunken omens. Hiccups mean you've been cursed. Sudden sneezing during a toast means someone you love is in danger. If a fly lands in your mug, it's good luck, unless the fly drowns. Then it's very bad luck, and you're advised to leave the tavern immediately and spend the night in a church pew. A woman with bright eyes and calloused fingers explains that you must never clink mugs across a threshold. Drinks shared between rooms invite division. You're not sure what that means, but when she offers a toast, you step all the way into the room first. She nods approvingly. Another tavern-goer older, smelling like damp hay and cinnamon, leans in and shares a particularly odd piece of advice. If your mug handle breaks off while drinking, your next child will be born with sharp teeth. You're not planning on having children tonight, or ever, but you clutch your mug a little tighter just in case. Even the layout of the tavern is said to have meaning. Sitting with your back to the door, unlucky. Drinking under a beam, neutral. Sitting directly across from the hearth, excellent, though it may make you fall in love temporarily with the first person who hands you a refill. You scoff, but when a stranger brings you a fresh mug and winks, you feel your stomach flutter. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the beer's just strong enough now to count as a relationship. As the night creeps along and more mugs are emptied than refilled, these superstitions start to feel less like quaint beliefs and more like tavern law. You hear of travelers who ignored the rules, like the man who lit a candle with the wrong hand and woke up in a ditch with a chicken tied to his belt, or the woman who refused to toast St. Bridget's name and had sour ale for 6 years straight. And speaking of saints, the tavern is littered with half-religious charms. St. Arnold, patron of brewers, gets mentioned often. His image hangs above the hearth in smudged paint, holding a mug and a staff. Keeps the ale from turning, someone mutters, and the barmaids from stabbing each other. There are whispers about magic bruise ones that only work if blessed under certain stars, or stirred counterclockwise while reciting a protection verse. Some people believe certain drinkers can taste bad luck in their ale. They are called bitter tongues. and no one will drink after them. You spot one such man pointed out by a cluster of whispering farmers, and notice that he drinks alone every night. No exceptions. The more you listen, the more you realize these superstitions serve a purpose. In a world where science is more idea than reality, people use belief to make sense of what happens in the bottom of their mugs, why someone gets sick, why a batch spoils, why your best friend turns into a dancing fool every time the fiddler plays that one cursed song about the miller's daughter. It's not just fear. It's meaning-making, a way to navigate the chaos of booze, bad luck, and unpredictable company. And as someone nearby spills their drink, and everyone else instinctively spits over their shoulder once for luck, twice for safety, 3 times to ward off goats, you find yourself doing the same. Because in this tavern, superstition isn't silly, it's survival. There's a knock at the door, 3 sharp raps that silence the room like a needle scratching across a lute string. It's not dramatic, not even loud, but something in the rhythm puts the entire tavern on pause. A few heads turn, one man stiffens, another quietly moves his mug closer to his chest. Even Maud, who hasn't flinched once all night, wipes her hands on her apron and mutters, "That'll be the taster." Moments later, the door creaks open, and a stout man steps inside. He's not impressive at first glance, round belly, rounder face, and eyes half-lidded, like he's perpetually unimpressed by everything in existence. But slung over his shoulder is a short staff marked with black notches, and dangling from his belt is a battered pewter spoon. The room parts for him the way a field does for a plow. He's the ale taster, and in this world, that means he's half health inspector, half executioner of bad brewing dreams. He makes his way through the room with casual authority, stopping at barrels like a priest checking the pews for sin. At each one, he ladles out a sample into his wooden bowl, sniffs deeply, swirls it, and takes a sip. It's not a performance, it's a judgment. You watch his face for reactions like it's a poker game, a twitch of the nose, a pause between swirls. Every move means something. The brewer's fate may rest in how long he holds that first sip. Maud watches from behind the bar, arms folded. She's not smiling. You get the impression she's seen tasters come and go, some fair, some crooked, but none capable of cowing her. Still, this matters. If her ale's judged subpar, she could be fined. If it's unsafe sour, spoiled, or lethal, she could lose her right to brew altogether. And in this town, that might as well be exile. The ale taster samples 3 barrels before turning to the one closest to your table, the one you're currently halfway through. He dips his spoon, sniffs once, then twice. His brow furrows. He sips. His mouth works silently. Then he nods. Approval. Quiet. Unceremonious. But firm. Maud lets out a breath through her nose and returns to wiping mugs with exaggerated calm. Around you, the tension in the air slowly releases like steam from a cracked lid. People resume talking. The fiddler picks up where he left off. You glance down at your drink and wonder what might have happened if that sip had gone the other way. See, in medieval England and much of Europe, local ale tasters or ale conners were part of a larger system of community enforcement. Brewing was serious business, both economically and biologically. A bad batch of ale could sicken a village. A weak one could invite accusations of cheating. so towns appointed these tasters to inspect, evaluate, and theoretically ensure quality. They weren't always experts, but they had authority and, more importantly, a literal taste for corruption if they were so inclined. The joke goes, "An honest ale conner is as rare as a clean chamber pot. You suspect this particular one falls somewhere in the middle gruff, but fair." He sits down near the fire now, ladle still damp, and accepts a mug from someone with a wink and a grunt. Whether he paid for it is unclear, probably not. You hear whispers of what happened last month when a nearby tavern was found watering down its ale with ditch runoff. The taster slapped them with a hefty fine and publicly declared the brewer a man of weak barley and weaker morals. He also, for dramatic effect, spat the sample onto the tavern floor and refused to let anyone mop it up for a week. "Let it remind them," he'd said, before storming out in a cloud of self-importance and ale vapor. But tasters aren't just about taste. They're tied to a whole framework of local ale laws, regulations passed down by borough councils, guilds, and sometimes just made up by whoever's loudest at the town meeting. You can't brew too strong without a license. You can't sell ale that's too weak, too warm, or too cloudy, unless you're in a village where cloudiness is considered a sign of freshness, in which case clarity is a crime. It's confusing, it's contradictory, and it's absolutely enforced with the kind of zeal usually reserved for religious doctrine or sheep theft. That's why ale barrels are often marked with chalk symbols: a crude star for strong, a line for weak, a symbol resembling a coiled snake for "don't ask, just drink." If the ale taster finds a mismatch between symbol and strength, you could lose more than your reputation. You could lose your livelihood. One table over, a man in a brewer's apron tells a story about a taster who demanded that every new barrel be blessed with a chant. Said it helped his digestion. The man snorts. What it helped was his ability to drink 20 mugs and still walk home. You also hear that some tasters carry small slivers of silver or lead, which they dip into the ale to detect poisonous herbs or dodgy additives. If the metal tarnishes, the ale's condemned. You look at your own mug and briefly wonder how many untested brews have passed your lips tonight. Too late now, but not all brewers fear the taster. Some court his favor gifts, flattery, free drinks for his traveling companions. If he likes your ale, he might spread the word to pilgrims, merchants, even the local reeve. That means more traffic, more coin, and more power. Ale isn't just a drink, it's a status symbol, a currency of taste and trust. The taster now snores softly by the fire, a dribble of ale glistening in his beard. Someone covers him with a dog blanket. He's done his rounds. Justice, such as it is, has been served. You think back on how different this is from modern inspections. No lab coats, no clipboards, no safety certifications. Just a man, a spoon, and the weight of local tradition. But somehow it works, or at least it doesn't collapse into total disaster more often than it already does. And as you sip what remains in your mug, a rich, earthy brew with a hint of something herbal, you find yourself grateful for the brief reassurance that someone, somewhere, has tasted this and said, "Yes, this won't kill you." Probably. It's not exactly a glowing Yelp review, but it's enough. You wake up with a dried pea stuck to your cheek, your tongue feeling like it's been used to clean old boots, and a vague recollection of singing a duet with someone's goose. The tavern is quieter now, but not asleep. A few fires still crackle. A couple of diehards are snoring under tables. Someone's softly playing a melody on a broken harp, which sounds mostly like distant weeping. And you're discovering what it means to have a medieval hangover. There's no aspirin here, no vitamin water, no greasy diner breakfast where the server calls you honey and pretends not to judge. There's just you, your dried pea, the remains of stale bread on a plate beside you, and the overwhelming sensation that your skull has been borrowed, dented, and poorly reassembled. You sit up slowly, very slowly. Your back protests. Your joints feel medieval in the worst sense. Your brain is a small, unhappy bird flapping around behind your eyes. And worst of all, someone nearby is chewing loudly on purpose, with open-mouth movements like a cow who's never heard of manners. It's enough to make you question every decision you've ever made, starting with stepping into this tavern. Hangovers in the Middle Ages aren't considered abnormal or even particularly concerning. They're just part of the natural consequence cycle. You drink, you wake up miserable, you blame the moon, your neighbor, or perhaps a hex. And then you do it all again the next night. You try to stand. Your knees disagree. You remain seated. Someone notices your struggle and slides over a mug of something warm and thick. Morning broth, they grunt. It's brownish, smells of turnip and sorrow, and has a thin, oily sheen across the top. You take a tentative sip. It tastes like water that's argued with meat, but didn't quite win. Still, it warms your belly and helps your stomach decide not to eject itself from your body just yet. In medieval taverns, hangover cures are equal parts superstition, guesswork, and sheer desperation. One man swears by raw eggs and sour ale. Another recommends chewing on dried mint leaves while chanting a hymn backward. A woman with extremely focused eyes insists that rubbing a dead mole against your temple will chase away the drink demon. You smile politely and turn down her offer of a spare mole. The most common remedy, more ale. Hair of the dog, they call it. But here it's less a folk saying and more a survival tactic. Many patrons don't so much recover from drinking as glide seamlessly from last night's buzz into this morning's rebuzz. You spot a man who's been unconscious for at least an hour, suddenly rise like a creaky zombie, grab a jug, take a deep swig, and sit back down with a satisfied grunt. His wife, seated beside him, continues knitting like this is entirely normal. You get up and stumble toward the hearth, hoping heat will bring clarity. Instead, you step in something that squelches and squishes. You freeze. You don't look down. You move on. You pass a man holding his head and whispering prayers. He opens one eye and says, "Too many jugs, not enough saints." You nod like this is deeply profound. Maybe it is. Maybe everything is in this state. The barmaid, now much less amused than she was last night, is dragging buckets of water across the floor, and occasionally slapping a mop at something unmentionable. She glares at the passed-out friar in the corner and mutters something about pious pigs. No one corrects her. You ask about remedies. She snorts. Sleep, bread, and if you can find one, an honest apothecary. She tosses you a small loaf that's hard enough to double as a weapon. You nibble at it anyway, wondering if medieval dentistry was just praying the bread softened before your teeth cracked. An old woman seated near the fire claims she has a cure-all tonic. She pulls out a flask and tells you it's made of rosemary, vinegar, boiled garlic, and a dash of crushed oyster shell. You take one whiff and nearly pass out again. She grins and drinks it herself without flinching. You begin to suspect she's immortal. You spot a younger lad trying to impress a cluster of listeners with his own hangover cure. Let a chicken peck your toes while you hum a drinking song. One man asks, deadpan, "Which song?" They argue for 10 minutes. The chicken in question waddles by and pecks the lad on the ankle unprompted. He declares it a sign and vomits into a bucket. Not all cures are gross. Some are just weirdly hopeful. A man whispers that drinking ale brewed under a waxing crescent moon can reverse any hangover. Another says, sleeping with a clove of garlic under your tongue ensures dreams of clarity and waking without pain. A third recommends slapping your own face 10 times, then biting a coin. You try none of these, but someone behind you does 3 in rapid succession and immediately walks into a post. Still, you do your best to reassemble yourself with the tools available. A half-empty mug, some sad bread, and a chair leg to lean on. You take slow sips of weak ale watered down, lukewarm, but surprisingly helpful. It coats your mouth, soothes your throat, and reminds your body that hydration is technically a thing. After a few minutes, you can think in complete sentences again, mostly. You learn that some taverns offer recovery breakfasts, stews, soft-boiled eggs, whatever's left from last night that hasn't sprouted legs. The theory is that warm food grounds the spirit and retethers the body. The practice is less poetic and more desperate chewing, while trying not to make eye contact with your reflection in the bottom of the mug. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a scratched piece of polished brass hanging on the wall. Your hair looks like a haystack that lost a fight. Your eyes resemble 2 pickled raisins floating in shame. You're pretty sure your breath could start a fire. You wink at your reflection. It doesn't wink back. You move on. Eventually, the tavern starts to stir again. New patrons shuffle in early risers with coin and purpose. A man carrying turnips, a woman with a goose under one arm. They nod at the wreckage of the previous night without comment. This is normal. This is Tuesday. You somehow are still here. You down the last of your ale, take a deep breath, and feel just slightly more alive. The hangover isn't gone, but it's been wrestled into submission like a very drunk dog that has agreed to lie down for a bit if you promise not to make loud noises. And, you know, deep down, that you're probably going to do this all again eventually. You're still reassembling yourself when you notice her. She's carrying a tray wooden, scratched, slanted slightly from one uneven leg and overloaded with mugs, but she moves like she's balancing feathers. Her skirt is hiked up just enough to avoid the sticky patches on the rush-covered floor, and her eyes, sharp as a butcher's knife, and twice as likely to make a man bleed scan the room like she owns it, which in a way she probably does. Not on paper, maybe, but in practice, this is her territory. You've met your first medieval barmaid, and she is both queen and battlefield medic in equal measure. She passes your table and flashes a tired, maybe almost smile, and you feel something shift in your already alcohol-soaked soul. Maybe it's the ache of your hangover, or the way she just expertly dodged a collapsing stool without spilling a single mug. But for a flickering moment, you're half in love. And you're not alone. Every other person in this tavern seems to have some kind of history with her, actual, imagined, or wishfully intoxicated. A merchant tries to compliment her by comparing her to a well-fed goose. She doesn't break stride. A shepherd offers her a half-rotted apple as a token. She takes it, sniffs it, and tosses it into the fire without missing a beat. A friar, maybe the same one from last night, proposes marriage in slurred Latin. She pats his head like a child and moves on. The thing is, romance in the medieval tavern is less Shakespeare and more sweaty pickup lines shouted over a plate of beans. And yet, in this dim, smoky world where everyone smells like damp wool and pickled onions, people still try. Maybe it's the drink. Maybe it's the way dim lighting hides most sins. Maybe it's because in a world with so little softness, any gesture of affection feels like gold. You overhear a lad trying to charm a barmaid with a riddle about an ox and a pear tree. He messes up the punchline and ends with, "And that's why I have no shoes." She just walks away. You sympathize. Someone nearby offers advice. You want her heart? Compliment her ladle. No one ever does. You file that away in your head just in case. Of course, not all tavern love is about the barmaids. You spot a pair of farmers entwined at a side table, giggling into their mugs, smearing gravy on each other's sleeves. A young woman and a traveling minstrel are holding hands under the table like school children caught in a sin. At one point, a man loudly declares his undying devotion to someone named Beatrice and promptly throws up on his own boots. Love, as always, is complicated. The truth is, taverns are one of the few social spaces where flirting is allowed, even encouraged, so long as it doesn't tip into violence or theft. In a world of arranged marriages, rigid class roles, and few opportunities to mingle outside your station, a shared mug and a crooked smile across a sticky table might be the closest thing to freedom. You hear of matches made in taverns, a smith and a baker's apprentice who met during a bar brawl and ended up married, scarred, and deliriously happy. A pair of brewers who discovered a shared love of bog myrtle and named their firstborn after a particularly potent batch. But you also hear of quick flings and forgotten names, of tavern pregnancies that spark whispered debates about paternity and sudden strategic trips to other villages. A man near you is loudly declaring that a tavern kiss doesn't count unless it's after the third mug. The woman beside him nods solemnly, like this is church doctrine. Another says she met her fourth husband in a place just like this. "He offered me stew," she says. "I said yes, then I said yes to him." Everyone laughs. She winks. It's unclear if the story is true. Doesn't matter, it's perfect. Then there's the other side. The lonely drinkers nursing their mugs and watching the couples with a mix of longing and resignation. You spot one his tunic worn thin at the elbows, staring into the foam like it owes him an apology. Someone asks if he's waiting for someone. "Just time," he says, and takes another sip. You feel a tap on your shoulder. It's her, the barmaid from earlier. She's handing you another mug, though you're pretty sure you didn't order it. "From the man in the corner," she says, nodding toward a figure with a scar over one eye, who raises his mug in greeting. You toast him cautiously. She smirks. Don't worry, he's got a wife. Just likes giving strangers ale. Says it improves karma. You sip. It's decent warm, a little fruity. You realize you're watching her again and quickly pretend to be very interested in the crumbs on your table. She notices anyway. Don't fall in love in a tavern, she says over her shoulder as she moves on. The morning's always uglier than the night promised. Words to live by. But despite the warning, people do fall in love in taverns, or something that feels like love, at least. They share stories, secrets, songs. They make promises with ale-soaked breath and crossed fingers. They forget names and remember eyes. And sometimes, just sometimes, it lasts. You hear tales of courtships born over spilled mugs and shared hangovers, of lords marrying commoners they met in roadside inns, of nobles who ran away with barmaids, choosing love over land. The romantic in you wants to believe those stories. The realist notes that those stories often end in exile, scandal, or very swift annulment. Still, you can't help but feel the charm of it all. The crackling fire, the shared warmth, the stolen glances through mug steam and half-drunken haze. The fact that for one night in this little bubble of warmth and music, you're not alone. You're part of the strange, boozy pulse of medieval life. And maybe, just maybe, if you don't screw it up, she'll remember your name tomorrow. Or at least your face, or at least that you didn't vomit on the floor. And really, in a place like this, that's as good a start as any. Sometime around what must be the deepest part of the night, when the fire has burned low and the air in the tavern feels like soup made of sweat and barley, you feel a tap on your shoulder. It's not the gentle kind. It's the kind that says you're about to be involved in something you definitely don't want to be involved in. You turn slowly and find two grim-faced men standing behind you, both of them holding wooden poles with iron loops on the ends. One is chewing a root. The other is already frowning in your general direction. "You there?" says the frowner. "We've had reports of loud singing, public wobbling, and disgraceful use of a chamber pot." You blink. You try to blink again just in case it helps. "I don't think that was me," you offer weakly. "I'm barely able to hum." He squints at you. You're wearing one boot and holding a ladle. You look down. You are in fact wearing one boot and holding what appears to be someone's soup ladle. You have no memory of either decision. Thus begins your brief but unforgettable brush with medieval public shaming. The men are part of the watch not quite police, not quite bouncers, but somewhere in between. Towns and villages assign these men to keep public order, especially around places that naturally spawn disorder. Places like this tavern. Their authority is a mix of actual law and just enough muscle to make people listen. They grab you gently but firmly under the arms and begin hauling you upright. "To the pillory with this one," says the root chewer. He looks too cheerful. You protest, but it's too late. The tavern watches with vague interest. One man offers you a piece of bread. Another raises a mug and says, "You'll be fine. I spent 2 nights in the stocks for hiccuping at a nun." They drag you toward the back door, half earnest, half with real authority. Outside, the air hits you like cold soup. It's damp, it's dark, and the only light comes from a distant lantern and the faint glow of moonlight behind low clouds. You stumble forward on one boot. They lead you to a row of wooden posts along the tavern's rear wall. each fitted with iron shackles and stained from years of similar nights. You don't see a full pillory, thankfully, but what you do see is the drunk tank medieval style. A bench chained to a wall, covered poorly with straw. They call it the drunkard's seat, also known locally as the perch, the idiot's bench, or more creatively, the fool's roost. You're pushed down onto it with a theatrical flourish and given a leather strap to hold in case the earth spins too fast. "You'll sit here," says the frowner, "until you can walk straight or deny everything convincingly." They chuckle and walk away. Congratulations, you've been publicly shamed, mildly. Medieval society has a long history of dealing with the inebriated and disorderly. Depending on the town and the severity of your behavior, punishments range from gentle nudging to very uncomfortable wooden devices. There's the cucking stool, a chair dunked into cold water, mostly reserved for scolds and public nuisances. There's the drunkard's cloak-a-barrel with holes cut for arms and legs, worn like a shaming costume as you're paraded around the square. Then, of course, the stocks, where your ankles or wrists or both are locked in place for all to see, usually with someone's leftover onion thrown at your face. Thankfully, your offense seems to be on the mild side of disgrace. You hear one of the watchmen murmur, "He's barely talking to ghosts. He'll sleep it off." You sit in the straw, hugging your ladle one boot on, and the other somewhere in the world. The night air is sobering, not in a philosophical, life-changing way, just literally. It's cold, and you start to feel each ache from your bones, each bruise from the bench, and each shameful inch of last night's mistakes creeping back into memory. Someone throws a blanket over you. You look up, and it's the barmaid, of course it is. "You were singing about turnips," she says, very earnestly. You groan. She drops a crust of bread in your lap. "Better than last week," she adds. "Last week, someone tried to baptize the cat." She leaves before you can reply. You pick up the bread and look around. You're not the only one here. Down the row, another man snores loudly into a hay bale. A woman rests her head on her knees, muttering what sounds like a very specific curse aimed at someone named Gregory. A third figure, half covered in an old cloak, simply rocks back and forth, whispering a song that might have once been a lullaby or a threat hard to say. You realize the bench isn't about punishment, it's about containment, a way to stop the party before it tips into chaos. If someone goes too far, they're pulled out, made an example of, and given a place to sit and think. Whether they actually think is another matter. For some, it's just a pause. For others, it's humiliation. If your friends walk by and see you, expect to hear about it for weeks. If your enemies walk by, well, hope you weren't wearing your nicest tunic. There's a story going around the tavern. Someone tells it every week about the time a local reeve got so drunk he arrested himself, locked himself in the stocks, lost the key, and had to bribe a passing sheep herder to set him free. Justice, they call it, ugly and symmetrical. You think about that as you chew your stale bread and fight sleep. Somewhere behind the tavern, the goat bleats softly. You consider bleating back. You don't. Eventually, the tavern door creaks open. The frowner returns, checks your eyes, nods once. "Less wobble in the pupils," he says. "You'll live." He unlatches the chain and helps you up. You wobble. He doesn't notice. Inside, the warmth hits you again, muggy, smoky, and full of noise. You limp back to your bench and settle in, ladle still in hand. No one mocks you. No one even mentions it, because in the tavern, everyone ends up on the bench eventually. It's just a matter of time. The fire is low again, sputtering now and then, like it's had enough of this night and everyone in it. You're slouched deep into your bench, still warm from your brief exile outside, nursing your third, I swear this is my last one, mug, when the tavern door swings open with a gust of night air and a whole lot of noise. A group stumbles in, trailing laughter and perfume, and something that smells suspiciously like boiled lavender. You don't even need to guess. They're nobles, or at least noble adjacent, which is sometimes worse. The kind of people who don't so much walk into a tavern as arrive in it. They sweep in like they expect trumpets, shedding cloaks and gloves and pretenses in equal measure. You can tell instantly who they are by the fabrics, soft, colorful, stitched where yours is frayed, layered where yours is patched. One wears a doublet so fine it probably costs more than this entire tavern's annual barley supply. Another's shoes are pointed so sharply they could injure livestock. Everyone in the room clocks them. Conversations pause just slightly. Mugs lower, eyes narrow or widen, depending on who's thinking, "Ah, coin," and who's thinking, "Ah, trouble." Maud lifts her chin slightly, but says nothing. She knows this game. Nobles don't usually drink with commoners. That's what private parlors and well-stocked wine cellars are for. But every now and then, during festivals, hunting trips, or on a dare, they step down from their velvet towers and slum it with the barley-stained masses. Sometimes for fun, sometimes out of rebellion, sometimes just to watch people flinch. This group looks like they're here for fun, but the kind of fun that costs someone else their teeth. They immediately commandeer a large table near the hearth, brushing aside a sleeping woodcutter without so much as an apology. One of them kicks over a stool and laughs. Another tosses a few coins on the table, like breadcrumbs to peasants. The message is clear. We're here, we're rich, and we expect to be entertained. Drinks are ordered wine naturally, even though you know the tavern's wine stock is basically just red, redder, and danger. One noble insists on claret from Gascony, which causes Maud to arch an eyebrow so high it nearly detaches from her forehead. She vanishes into the back and returns with something vaguely purplish in a chipped jug. The noble drinks it, coughs violently, and declares it full-bodied. His friends cheer. Then the music starts. One of the nobles, lean, absurdly blonde, and clearly used to being the center of any room pulls a lute from nowhere, strums a few lazy chords, and begins to sing. It's a hunting song full of dogs and horns, and the occasional metaphor about swans that probably isn't appropriate. His voice isn't bad, but his smugness is louder. The table claps along, more interested in his jawline than his talent. A few locals try to join in, they hum, they raise their mugs, they nod. But there's a tension in the air, the kind that always arrives when power meets ale. The nobles don't mind the company until they do. And when they do, things get messy. One man, likely a farmhand, judging by the mud-caked tunic and the hands like cracked leather, makes the mistake of laughing a little too hard at a noble's joke. Not at him, just near him. The noble turns, smiles thinly, and dumps the rest of his wine into the man's lap. "Oops," he says, not sounding sorry. The room freezes. The farmhand stares down at his lap, then up at the man who just wine-baptized him. He looks like he's deciding whether to punch him or cry. In the end, he does neither. He stands, nods once, and walks out. No one stops him. The door closes softly behind him, a quiet punctuation mark in a room full of unspoken sentences. You feel something shift in your chest. That was ugly. That was normal. Because when nobles party too hard, they don't just risk their own dignity, they throw elbows at everyone else's. They can afford to act like fools. Their hangovers come with feather pillows and forgiving scribes. Yours come with a boot to the ribs and maybe a fine for disturbing the peace. Still, the room starts to ease back into its rhythm. A few jokes are cracked. The local fiddler picks up a tune again, something loud and fast enough to drown out the sour taste left by the wine stunt. You sip your ale and watch the noble table. One of them has now climbed onto the bench and is attempting to dance. It's not going well. He sways, stumbles, and narrowly avoids the fire. He throws his arms out and shouts something in French. No one answers. He looks offended by the silence. Then, slowly, he starts to wobble. You can see it coming. His face changes. He turns pale. He covers his mouth, sways forward, then vomits into his own goblet. He holds it there for a second, as if unsure what just happened, then sets it gently on the table like a gift. Everyone nearby scoots away. One woman giggles. Another man claps, because apparently noble etiquette stops at digestion. No one removes the goblet. It just sits there, glowing with warning. Eventually, the noble leans back, sighs heavily, and begins to snore with impressive volume. His friends step around him like furniture. One tries to sketch something rude on his forehead with soot. Another steals his coin pouch. No one intervenes. Maud walks over, takes the goblet with 2 fingers, dumps it into a bucket, and walks away without breaking stride, because this isn't her first noble disaster. You learn that some taverns ban nobles outright. Others give them a private room, far from the common drinkers. But this one just waits them out. Eventually, they'll pass out, wander off, or get bored. The common folk will sweep up the coins, the shame, and the spilled wine, and things will return to normal until the next one arrives. As you finish your drink, you glance around at the tavern. The faces worn with hard lives, the quiet laughter, the calloused hands around mugs. You raise your ale to no one in particular, then drink deeply, savoring the warm, honest burn of barley and bitterness. And you think not for the first time tonight, I'd rather be a peasant with beer than a noble with a goblet full of puke. You've just watched a noble vomit into his own goblet and fall asleep with the serene expression of a man who's convinced no one will ever hold him accountable. The tavern has absorbed the moment with the sort of resignation that only comes from centuries of witnessing the exact same thing happen over and over again. And just when you think it's safe to relax, someone at a nearby table slams their hand down and shouts, "Court is in session." A cheer erupts. Before you can even question what's happening, a large stool is dragged into the center of the room and ceremoniously declared the throne of justice. Welcome to Drunk Court, a beloved, unofficial tradition, where the ale flows like logic, the laws are made up on the spot, and everyone is somehow both guilty and not sober enough to care. the judge is a butcher with a stained apron, one tooth, and a surprisingly regal bearing. He bangs a wooden spoon against an empty jug and bellows, "Bring forth the accused!" A murmur rises as names are shouted from every corner. Tom for spilling the gravy, Elsie for taking 2 turns at the dice, Gerald for being suspiciously quiet. The names come fast. The crimes come faster. And then someone calls out, "The traveler!" You look up. You are the traveler. Suddenly, you're on your feet, being herded toward the stool by a half-dozen cheering patrons who are far too invested in this spontaneous kangaroo court. Someone tosses a cabbage in your direction as a sign of encouragement or maybe ridicule. You sit down and glance around helplessly. There's no real escape, not unless you plan to crawl under a table and chew your way through the wall like a particularly desperate badger. The butcher judge squints at you. You stand accused of excessive blinking, awkward posture, and... He sniffs the air theatrically. Abuse of fermented grain. How do you plead? Drunk, you say honestly. Guilty, the room roars. The trial begins. A prosecutor steps forward, a woman in a flower-covered dress with wild hair and a grin that could curdle cream. She begins listing off invented crimes with the flair of a street performer. He drank more than he paid. He took the last piece of bread. He winked at the barmaid and she didn't wink back. You open your mouth to protest. She interrupts with, "Objection." The judge overrules. You're not sure how that works, but you go along with it. Then comes your defense assigned on the spot. A drunk man named Walter, who has no idea who you are and can't pronounce your name, but is very confident in your innocence. "This fine a human," he declares, gesturing broadly in your direction, "has harmed no one except maybe that goat outside, and that was consensual." Everyone nods solemnly. You hope he's joking. As absurd as it seems, this whole performance is strangely coherent. Mock trials like this are an old tavern tradition in many parts of medieval Europe, an improvised social court that keeps the mood light and gives people a chance to poke fun at each other without resorting to fists. Instead of punishment, there's laughter. Instead of verdicts, there are toasts, unless you lose badly. Your witnesses are brought forward, mostly people who claim you spilled something on them, looked at them funny, or stole their seat. One man swears you sang off-key. Another accuses you of smiling like you're up to something. The judge considers these testimonies while sipping from a large mug labeled court evidence. Then the jury is consulted, a random group of 6, all visibly inebriated. They cast their votes by tossing bits of bread into a bowl, crust up for innocent, crust down for guilty. There are no rules to this just ritual. The verdict, guilty of course. The punishment, dramatic death. The cheer goes up as the judge reaches behind the bar and produces a wooden sword. You're instructed to stand, place one hand over your heart, and look very sorry. The prosecutor raises a mug and says, "May this be a lesson to all who drink without honor." The judge raises the sword, sways a little, and then gently taps you on the shoulder with it 3 times before yelling, "Slain!" You fall to the floor as dramatically as you can manage without vomiting. Someone throws a cloak over you. The tavern bursts into applause. A minute later, you're back on your bench, handed a fresh mug, and now referred to as the resurrected. Your trial is over. Court continues with new victims. A woman is accused of dancing with 3 people in one song. A man is brought up for snoring mid-toast. Another is charged with mug-hogging. As silly as it seems, this ritual serves a purpose. In a place with no central entertainment, drunk court is pure theater. It's community bonding disguised as law. It lets people laugh at themselves, settle petty grievances, and mock authority in a way that feels both safe and satisfying. Even the tavern staff seems relieved by the break from real arguments and the more dangerous kind of brawling. Sometimes actual justice gets tangled in the nonsense. You hear about a tavern up north where the local reeve used mock trials to gauge whether people were harboring grudges. Another story tells of a landless knight who was once convicted of being too handsome and ordered to give a kiss to every woman in the tavern. He died smiling, someone claims. No one questions it. And every now and then, someone takes it too seriously. You catch a sharp exchange between 2 men when one is found guilty of treasonous whistling. Apparently, it wasn't a joke to him. Maud appears just in time, slams a jug on the table, and declares the verdict void due to excessive whining. A new trial starts 5 minutes later, with a dog as the defendant. No one objects. The dog wins. As the night deepens and the mock trials wind down, you sip your ale and realize something remarkable. Drunk court works. It keeps the peace. It diffuses tension, and it gives everyone a role to play, even if that role is witness to the crime of having an ugly hat. You survived your sentence with your dignity mostly intact, and in this tavern, that makes you practically nobility. You're halfway through another mug one that tastes vaguely of pine needles and regret when a man sits beside you who is clearly, unmistakably trouble. His boots are too quiet, his cloak too nondescript, and his eyes scan the room like he's cataloging weaknesses. He doesn't introduce himself. He doesn't need to. The tavern, suddenly a little colder, seems to acknowledge him with a collective flinch. Even Maud, who fears neither gods nor rats, pauses for just a beat before sliding him a mug without being asked. You've found yourself sitting next to an outlaw, or at least someone who plays the part very convincingly. He sips, watches, and finally mutters, "You've got the look of someone new to the wrong side of a good night." You give him a weak smile and nod. "Just passing through?" "That's what they all say," he says with the faintest smile of someone who's heard it from both travelers and bounty hunters. Around you, the tavern hums like nothing's changed. But there's a subtle shift in posture now. Back straighter, laughter just a little forced. Because everyone knows that sometimes these taverns host more than tired farmers and thirsty pilgrims. Sometimes they play safe house to people on the run, bandits, deserters, smugglers, and all the other shades of gray that medieval justice doesn't make room for. And then there are the unlicensed taverns, those little side-room speakeasies tucked into alleys or basements, serving unregulated ale to people who don't want questions, and certainly aren't answering any. This place might be legal, but you're starting to think it's got a soft spot for legal-adjacent activities. The man beside you gestures with his mug. You ever drink in a cellar with no stairs? You squint. That's not a thing. Oh, it's a thing. You jump in, you drink, and you climb out when you can still feel your knees. If you can't, well, someone usually checks in the morning. It's hard to tell if he's joking. It's also hard to tell if your drink is strong enough to make that story sound reasonable. Probably both. He tells you about the black ale den's unofficial drinking holes, hidden behind false walls, accessible only through bribes, passwords, or sheer bad luck. They serve anything from Groot to grain alcohol that could strip paint off a relic. Had a drink once that made me see music, he says. Bright green, tasted like pine tar and bees. You laugh nervously. He doesn't. In these unlicensed places, there are no ale tasters, no monks, no rules, just coin, drink, and the understanding that if someone collapses, you roll them into the corner and keep pouring. And while you might get a stronger brew or a faster buzz, you're also playing hopscotch with poisoning, robbery, and the occasional, oops, we thought you were someone else moment. They're not all bad, the man says almost defensively. Some are just run by folks who can't afford the taxes or got banned for no good reason. He shrugs. Maybe their ale was too good. You raise an eyebrow. Is that possible? He leans in slightly. Anything's possible when the Lord's cousin has a brewing license and you don't. It's a reminder that beneath the warm surface of tavern culture lies a very medieval truth. Control equals power. And that includes control over who gets to sell alcohol and where. Brewing licenses are handed out not always to the best, but to the best connected. So if your brew is popular, but your politics are poor, you might find yourself unofficial real fast. And that means you either shut down or go underground. Some of the most famous outlaw dens are built in places no one would think to check. Abandoned mills, ruined chapels, even forest clearings marked only by certain trees tied with cloth. You hear of one that floats on a barge down the river, never docking in the same place twice. They call it the Drunken Duck, someone says. No sign you follow the smell. Of course, these places attract a different crowd, not just bandits and smugglers, but poets, prophets, gamblers, and the eternally curious. Some go just to say they've been. Others go because they need to, because they've been banned from every official establishment for debts, heresy, or just being too loud after curfew. The man beside you leans back and watches the fire flicker. You know what I like about the outlaw dens? He says. Nobody pretends. You nod slowly. There's a kind of truth to that. In the regular tavern, people still perform, still try to play the part of the good neighbor, the hard worker, the loyal servant. But in the outlaw den, the masks come off. You are what you are. And if what you are is desperate, dangerous, or deeply weird, well, that's your business. Still, it's not without danger. You hear stories. A man poisoned by ale, laced with bitter herbs, meant to mimic hops, but pulled from the wrong bush. A brewer who vanished after a noble tried to buy his recipe, and he refused. A whole den that was burned down in the night after a visiting friar overheard the wrong joke about the bishop. Yet, despite the risk, these places thrive, because they offer something the official taverns don't. Freedom, even if it's smoky and sketchy, and smells like fermented turnip socks. Back at your table, someone's telling a story about the time they stumbled into a barn thinking it was an inn and ended up drinking with actual highwaymen. Nice fellows, he insists. Terrible hygiene, but generous. The man next to you finishes his mug and stands. If you ever want to find one, he says. Ask for the place where the door's always locked, but everyone's inside. He walks away before you can ask what that even means. You watch him disappear into the darkness beyond the hearth's light and wonder if he's headed for one of those outlaw places right now, one of those shadowy corners of the world where coin speaks louder than law and the drink flows until memory stops. And part of you wants to follow not because you think it's wise, but because, let's be honest, you've already made worse decisions tonight. The tavern quiets for just a moment, brief, like the pause between thunderclaps when someone starts humming. It's soft at first, like an itch at the edge of your hearing. Then another voice joins in. Then another. And before you know it, the room has picked up a rhythm so ancient and strangely familiar. You're sure you've heard it before. Not here. Not in this lifetime, but maybe somewhere. Maybe everywhere. Bring a sail and bring it strong. We'll drink till the rooster forgets his song. You feel your mouth moving before your brain catches up. You're singing. Everyone is. Even the people who barely know the words are faking it with such confidence that the lyrics don't matter anymore. This is no hymn, no polite court ballad. This is a drinking song, and its only purpose is to be loud, catchy, and impossible to sing without sloshing something. There's clapping now, stomping. The mug banging begins. People thumping the beat into the tables, the benches, the bones of the tavern itself. It's like the whole room becomes a drum, a single rhythm pounding out joy, defiance, and just enough chaos to keep the night interesting. Drinking songs are everywhere in the medieval world, but in taverns like this, they are the sacred texts of the inebriated. No one teaches them formally, you just absorb them, hear them once, and they live in your blood forever. Some are bawdy, some are mournful, some sound like nonsense, until you realize the third verse is about someone stealing a bishop's horse. The magic lies in their simplicity, easy to learn, hard to forget, impossible not to join in once they start. Their choruses are built for shouting, not singing. Their melodies live in that sweet low stretch of the voice, where everyone can participate, old, young, tone-deaf, or terrified. And the best part, most of them have survived for centuries. You're humming a tune that once echoed through the rafters of a tavern like this in 1392, then again in 1610, and again last week at a pub where someone spilled beer on your boots while screaming for England. The words may shift, the names change, but the spirit remains. Here's to the brewer, blind but bold. He mixed the barley with dust and gold. The man next to you yells the wrong verse, but nobody cares. A woman a few tables over adds a harmony that is so off-key it makes your spine curl, but it's glorious. A stable boy claps in a way that suggests he's never clapped before in his life, but his grin is wide and his cup is fuller than yours. Every region has its own songs, of course. Some are about love, some are about war. Many are about food. Oddly enough, sausages, bread. The miraculous properties of turnips are popular. The refrain is currently being belted out about a pig that drank ale and forgot how to walk straight. Like us, someone laughs. You join in despite knowing only every third word. It doesn't matter. One man shouts that he knows a French tavern song. Half the room boos, half the room cheers. He launches into it anyway. It's fast, has too many vowels, and it involves questionable gestures. But by the end of it, the entire room is chanting the last line, like they were born doing it. Drinking songs carry history in their bones. They tell you who was fighting, who was hungry, who was in love, and who absolutely should not have been near livestock. Scholars have traced some back to Viking halls, Roman military camps, and ancient fertility festivals that probably ended in nudity and questionable herbal decisions. And here you are in a medieval tavern, continuing the tradition. Your voice is hoarse, your mug is dangerously low, and someone near you is attempting to harmonize while standing on a stool that clearly doesn't support that level of confidence. They fall halfway through the chorus. Laughter erupts. The song doesn't stop. It never does. Then comes the one everyone's been waiting for. A hush falls just for a second. A single voice starts the opening line. "Oh, roll the barrel down the hill." And immediately chaos. Everyone knows it. Everyone loves it. It's the medieval version of a greatest hit, a certified banger, passed from tavern to tavern like sacred fire. It tells the tale of a traveling brewer, 3 barrels of ale, and 1 very amorous donkey. The details are fuzzy, possibly criminal, but the chorus is legendary. You belt it out like your life depends on it. Some people leap up, spinning each other in a lurching, ale-fueled dance that knocks over 2 stools and 1 very surprised cat. Someone bangs a drum they didn't have 5 minutes ago. You think someone's playing the jawbone of an animal. It's unclear what species. Doesn't matter, it slaps. Songs like these are a release, a way to shout out what you can't say sober, a way to make noise together, be together, even if your only shared language is drink, drink, drink. No one is a stranger during the chorus. No one is unloved if they're clapping on the beat. Even the most standoffish noble from earlier is mouthing the words like he doesn't want anyone to see he knows them. And once the final verse is sung, the one about the donkey stealing the brewer's clothes and running off into the woods, the room erupts. Cheers, foot stomps, tankards slammed down like punctuation. Then silence, a breath followed by someone shouting, "Again!" You laugh, raise your mug, and take another sip of warm, slightly frothy barley magic. These songs won't be written in any great chronicles. They won't be performed in noble courts or carved into marble walls, but they will be passed down over mugs, around fires, sung loudly and badly by generations who don't remember who wrote them, only how they make you feel, which is, against all odds, alive. The echoes of that last raucous chorus still linger in your ears, half melody, half breathless wheezing as the tavern settles into a quieter rhythm. Not quiet exactly, just conversational, like the high tide of chaos has receded and left behind small pools of chatter, each one bubbling with its own little world of gossip, banter, and bragging. You tilt your mug back, find it mostly empty, and decide now's as good a time as any to listen in on what passes for news in this place. Because make no mistake, taverns are medieval newsrooms, no parchment, no printing press, no elegant calligraphy required. Just mouths, mugs, and an appetite for information that may or may not be true. At the table to your left, a man with a nose like a winter carrot is whispering urgently to a half-asleep blacksmith about a witch found outside the village. "She had a mark on her foot shaped like a duck," he says. A duck? The blacksmith grunts. That's just gout. The man looks hurt. Witches can have gout. Behind you, two women are embroiled in a hot debate about whether the baker's new apprentice is actually a runaway nun. She says she came from the East, one insists, and she needs dough like it's a penance. The other shrugs. Or maybe she just hates bread. On the far side of the hearth, a group of travelers are holding court, swapping tales of far-off towns where the dead have started walking, or where pigs have been born with two heads and uncanny economic instincts. One man swears he met a talking goose. She charged a toll across the river, he says, and she bit my cousin when he tried to sneak by. You're not sure what's true. You're not even sure any of it is. But that's not the point. In a world where the fastest form of communication is a horse with a letter tucked in its saddlebag, taverns like this are how information travels. Fast, messy, and wildly entertaining. You pick up snippets from all corners of the room. A war brewing in the north, a merchant ship sunk by river pirates, a nobleman's daughter caught sneaking into a monastery, possibly dressed as a monk, depending on the version. Someone claims the king is dead. Someone else says he was just sleeping funny. A third insists the king died twice and came back with different eyebrows. It's a glorious mess. And the bartenders and barmaids, they know more than anyone. You ask Maud if she hears anything interesting. She snorts. That tinker over there's got 3 wives, and none of them know about each other. One's in this room. You glance over at the tinker. He's playing dice with a man wearing a feather in his hat that might be alive. You don't ask which wife is nearby. You've had enough danger for one night. She goes on. A tax collector came through yesterday and didn't leave with all his toes. 2 nobles passed through last week and tried to buy my dog. And someone left a severed duck head under the table this morning. Felt warm? You blink. Any idea who did it? Could have been ceremonial, she says casually. Or just breakfast. The tavern's not just a news hub, it's also a rumor forge, a place where half-truths get hammered into ironclad facts with enough retellings. A simple merchant dispute becomes a scandal. A missing cart becomes a kidnapping. A loud sneeze from a stranger becomes the start of a plague. By the time news makes it to the next village, it's evolved beyond recognition. That's not a flaw, it's a feature. Because medieval life isn't just about surviving the elements and taxes, it's about surviving the boredom. And rumors are entertainment with just enough real-world seasoning to keep you coming back. Take the story being told at the next table. A man swears he watched a knight duel a bear. Not just any bear, he insists. A bear wearing a helmet. His companion shakes her head. That was no bear. That was Sir Bernard. He's just very hairy. The man pauses, considers it, and mutters. Explains the lack of growling. Nearby, a group of younger drinkers are discussing omens. A comet seen last week. A sheep born with blue eyes. A priest with a nosebleed during Mass. The end is coming, one says with the glee of someone who's been waiting for it. You'll see, the sky will rain frogs. His friend snorts into her drink. The sky already rained frogs last year. They just bounced. And while much of this chatter is nonsense, or at least highly embellished nonsense, some of it does contain a kernel of truth. You hear about a road being closed due to landslides? A monastery burned in the next shire over. A merchant caught smuggling relics disguised as turnips. These things likely happened, probably. You think. Hopefully not the relics. The point is, if you want to know what's going on in the world, or at least what people think is going on, there's no better place than the tavern. And not just this one every village, town, and dusty roadside inn has its own version of this buzzing hive of stories. Together, they form a kind of oral network equal parts terrifying and beautiful. And don't think it's just locals trading whispers. Travelers bring new threads into the weave, accents, songs, tall tales, and sometimes even actual facts. You hear someone reciting a Latin phrase in the corner, claiming it's a prophecy. Someone else corrects him. Turns out he was quoting a soup recipe. Still, it spreads. You hear about people who travel tavern to tavern, not for food or coin, but just to collect stories. Lore chasers, someone calls them, walking parchment. One even claims to have memorized every known version of The Miller's Wife and The Haunted Loaf, which apparently ends with a talking biscuit and several arrests. And in this warm pocket of flickering candlelight and clinking mugs, you realize that even in a world without headlines or hashtags, people are still connected by the stories they share over drinks. It's messy, it's inconsistent, and it's perfect. So when someone turns to you and says, "Heard anything good lately?" you smile, sip your ale, and lean in. Because tonight, you're not just drinking. You're part of the news. It's late now, so late that even the shadows seem tired. The fire's burned low, the embers crackling like old bones in the grate. Most of the wild ones have either staggered home or passed out under tables, and even Maud is moving slower behind the bar, wiping down mugs that don't need it just to keep her hands busy. The tavern has thinned out. What remains is a quiet hum, the tail end of a storm, the warm fog of a room that's just barely still awake. You're still upright somehow, one boot off, your head resting on your palm, a mug half full of something lukewarm and suspicious. And that's when the voice comes. Calm, stern, no room for debate. "All right," says Maud. "That's it." No dramatic speech, no clanging bell or ceremonial closing hymn, just a flat declaration that closing time has arrived and the party, whatever was left of it, is over. A few people groan in protest. One man tries to start another song but forgets the words halfway through the first line and falls asleep with his mouth open. A couple near the hearth continues to whisper, clearly hoping to outlast the shutdown. But Maud's already blowing out candles and muttering names like spells. She's not going to throw anyone out, not yet, but she's definitely encouraging departure via passive-aggressive dimming. You finish what's left in your mug, which might be ale or might be water, someone stored in a barley barrel. Either way, it tastes like end of night and regret. The warmth in the room starts to fade, not from the fire, but from the energy. You feel the hush settle in, a different kind of intimacy takes hold. Less raucous, more fragile. The kind that only shows up when the music stops and people start remembering how tired they really are. A man across the room is mumbling apologies to someone who already left an hour ago. Another is trying to hug everyone in sight, including a coat rack. One woman just stares into her mug like it holds a prophecy she hasn't quite deciphered yet. And then comes the sweeping. That's the universal signal. When the tavern owner's son starts pushing a battered old broom across the floor, never looking directly at you but always inching closer, it's time to go. No one likes to be the last to leave. That's when things get awkward. That's when you have to help stack the chairs or hear the owner's thoughts on taxes. You don't want that. So you stretch, groan, and rise slowly. Your knees creak like church doors. Your spine clicks into place like someone slapping shut a heavy book. You check your pockets. Half a crust of bread, 1 copper coin, and a dried sprig of something that smells like time and bad decisions. No idea where you got it. You shuffle toward the door, but it's not a straight shot. Closing time in a medieval tavern means maneuvering through the aftermath. Past bodies curled on benches, a man snoring into a puddle of mead, someone tangled in a fishing net, don't ask, and a large dog that definitely wasn't here earlier. He growls softly in his sleep. You tiptoe around him. At the door, Maud is pinning shut the ledger, muttering to herself. She catches your eye, nods once not a thank you, not exactly. More like, you didn't make a mess, so I tolerate your existence. High praise, really. You linger for just a moment, not because you want to stay. Your eyelids are made of lead, and your feet feel like someone else's, but because leaving means re-entering the outside world. And right now, that world is dark, cold, and unforgiving. In here, at least, you're surrounded by stale bread and poor life choices. Out there, it's just the moon and your own thoughts, not a comforting combo. Still, you push open the door. The air hits you like a bucket of pond water, wet, cold, and oddly aggressive. The night is pitch black, lit only by the softest slice of moonlight and a few guttering torches stuck into the mud outside. The sky is low, clouded, the stars hiding like they've got better things to do. You step into the muck, your one remaining boot sinking with a quiet squelch. Behind you, the tavern door swings shut with a final thud, like the chapter's closed. And it has, because taverns don't have encores, not the real ones. When it's over, it's over. You can't beg for one more song or plead for another round. The ale is locked away, the fire is sleeping, and the floor is being swept with a vengeance. Out here, the silence is complete. You hear your own breath, your own boots. Somewhere in the distance, an owl asks a question you don't have the answer to. A branch creaks. A wolf howls, or maybe it's a drunk noble trying to find his horse. You start walking, unsure where you're headed. Back to a rented cot, a barn, a pile of hay behind the chapel. You're not picky at this hour. Anything horizontal is a blessing. Behind you, the tavern sits quiet and still, like it never held a room full of shouting and dancing and spilled gravy. Tomorrow the stools will be upright again. The fire will be lit. Someone will sweep out the bones and bread crusts and misplaced turnip. The cycle will start anew. But tonight it sleeps. And so, finally, will you. You don't quite remember how you got back. You remember the door shutting behind you, the crunch of frost on the ground, and the wind sneaking its fingers down your collar like a thief. You remember stumbling past the chapel with its crooked steeple, blinking up at stars that look like candle stubs stuck in the ceiling of the world. You remember a dog barking, or maybe that was you. But somehow, miraculously, questionably, you end up in a bed of sorts. It's straw, mostly some wood, definitely something sticky. You're in a communal lodging house, the medieval equivalent of a no-star inn. 1 room, 3 dozen souls, and the smell of feet aged like fine cheese. A low fire crackles in a hearth that's lost interest in heating anyone more than 3 feet away. Around you, figures wrapped in wool, linen, and desperation snore, mutter, or just stare into the middle distance, too tired to close their eyes. You ease yourself down, ignoring the crunch beneath you that might be an old turnip or someone's lost merit, and let out a long, slow breath. And just like that, it's done. The night, the long, spiraling, unpredictable night in that medieval tavern has ended. And as you lie there, blinking up at a ceiling held together by soot, spiders, and optimism, your mind does what minds always do after a long drink. It replays everything. You remember your first steps into the tavern wide-eyed and slightly damp from the road. The smell of smoke and yeast and wet wool hitting your face like a welcome and a warning all at once. You remember the first mug full of grit and promise. The food brown, beige, and better than it looked. The barmaid with the knives in her smile. The games of dice and the arguments about turnips. The noble's projectile regrets. And more than anything, you remember the feeling of it all. Raw, real, loud, human messy in the best way. No pretension, no polish, just people, with nothing in common but the shared decision to spend one more evening together, drowning their troubles in barley and bad decisions. Taverns in the medieval world weren't just places to drink. They were everything. Community halls, dance floors, law courts, confessionals, theaters, and post offices rolled into one smoky, muddy, gloriously chaotic space. They were where you learned things, where you lost things, where you found things you never expected to care about. They were the pulse of the town. Each mug raised a heartbeat, each spilled drink a scar. And no matter where you came from, what you did, or how many coins you had in your purse for a few hours in that low-ceilinged room, you were part of something. You were one of them. Of course, the hangover will follow, maybe not just in your head, but in your knees, your spine, your soul. You'll wake up with your tongue glued to your teeth and a vague sense of regret, shaped like a goose. But you'll also wake up with stories. Stories of the ale taster who sniffed your mug like a hound judging soup. Of the mock trial where you were executed for excessive blinking. Of the barmaid who knew every secret before you even opened your mouth. Of the outlaw with a laugh like gravel and the rumor network that spun the night into legend. Because you didn't just visit a medieval tavern, you lived it. You drank its ale. You danced on its dirt. You told its lies and sang its songs. And now, here in the quiet aftermath, you're part of its history. One more ghost in its rafters. One more warm shape in its long memory. And if you listen, just as your eyes finally start to close, you might still hear it. The faintest echo of a chorus, a mug clink, a soft laugh beneath the hum of sleep. That's the tavern calling you back. Don't worry, it always will.